In a world where digital currencies reign supreme, one cryptocurrency is poised to redefine the game, no? Litecoin's resurrection and resurgence is coming, and the Litecoin forecast is your 24/7 guide to riding this silver surge. Join us as we stream continuously, analyzing every move, discussing macroeconomic trends, what's driving this bull market, what narratives will come into play as we move higher, and what we'll be watching for signs of a broad market top T. The Litecoin forecast illuminating the path to redemption, hosted by Y Litecoin, joining us now.
Hey, how's it going, guys? I'm going live a little bit early, as I typically do before we bring people in. But DeFlanders asked me yesterday if Vlad was ever going to come on, and so I messaged him, and one sec, actually I just got a message. One sec. Sorry about that. Hey Steve, how's it going? So we'll have Vlad come in here in like 20 minutes or so. If you guys don't know Vlad, he hosts the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. He has a lot of like actual real I would say real Bitcoiners, people that are more focused on the true value prop of Bitcoin, more of the cypherpunk types that actually write code or have more of an understanding of Bitcoin than you see with most of the influencers that talk about price only. There's a good source of information. It'll be cool to talk to him. I haven't actually met him, so we'll do that. But before we get into that, like we were saying yesterday, there's going to be some volatility around FOMC. I was noticing earlier, I didn't tweet about it, but almost did. We had this building bullish divergence on CMF, which I always do track for quite a long time. It was making me feel like the odds of this breaking higher were decent. Usually when we get these sharp rises in CMF, we get at least a move higher before you start forming bearish divergence on the lower time frames. So I still don't know, but like we've been expecting, whenever this next higher time frame move breaks, it should be really strong. What's up, Jeff? How you doing? Hal said pump it. Yeah, I haven't really been paying attention too much to those. I would think that we do have another FOMC in March, like middle of March, 19th or something. If there's talks of quantitative easing and lowering interest rates, that would be a good blow off top signal to me. I was always expecting the Fed to kind of surrender to inflation at some point. I've been talking to a lot of people about that since 2022, that, you know, I didn't think the government and central banks were that serious about fighting inflation. So once the Fed publicly surrenders to that, talks about, oh, we don't need to reach 2% anymore, that could catalyze the final rally in top and risk assets. Everyone would believe that good times are ahead, up only. QE might just come in a different guise. Yeah, that's been my contention since 2022. I think we've seen stealth QE. Some people have been performing hindsight analysis on that, and that's what I thought you would see. Like these various programs, like the BTFP facility for these regional banks or banks that were failing back in March of 2023, to me was stealth quantitative easing. Right, they're technically disguised as short-term loans to banks, but these short-term loans to banks will have to be indefinite loans. There's no way they can pay them back, right? If they're insolvent because they can't sell the assets, the loans on their book anywhere close to what, right, at an extreme discount is what I mean, like 20-30%. Those short-term loans could never be repaid. They're just giving the money to the banks who are then giving it to depositors, not actually fixing any of the problems, just delaying a crisis. Yeah, Aaron, we're getting close. Less than 300 to 1K. It's been a bit of a grind. Yeah, asset purchase program, balance sheet expansion. I mean, they've still been technically doing QT with reducing assets on their balance sheet, but I think QE is showing up in more ways than just on the Fed's balance sheet, right? With adjusting treasury issuance on the government side of things, not the central bank. You see, I was arguing that you'd see the net same effect 2 years ago of stimulus. And it's not just the Fed, it's other central banks too. And there's just so much money still out there, still is out there, right? There's so much money in Bitcoin at this $2 trillion valuation that can rotate into smaller altcoins where they're so illiquid that it doesn't take much money to move them to crazy market caps. What time is it? 4:38. About 20 minutes. And make sure to like and subscribe. It does help out this channel. I was hoping to get quite a few people in here for Vlad. I know it's a weekday, so it's Wednesday during the workday for most people. But hopefully some people can tune in. Tim asked, is it now or later? Vlad, interview scheduled for 4 p.m. Eastern. Your prediction once the ETFs announced LDC XMR finally breaks its price relationship? I think Litecoin against most everything is going to rally pretty hard. I still think the setup against others is... Oh, this is the wrong LTC. Yeah, it's just been sideways for almost 10 years. We'll see, but the setup for Litecoin against all these other coins still looks like we just started this breakout here. Should head vertically, and there's only so much to me that you can tell from technical analysis. We look at it all the time, but this is just something that you can talk about daily. It's interesting to most people. I want to see it worth more than XMR for once. Speak more about stealth quantitative easing. Yeah, for sure. I would refer to my this does a pretty good job of explaining stealth quantitative easing. You can look at this. It's sort of what I was trying to allude to in 2022 to a lot of people outside of the crypto community. They were making an argument that adjusting treasury issuance was acting as stealth quantitative easing, so more reliance on short-term duration treasury issuance. Stealth QE can also come in the form of these loans that the Fed's giving to, like the loans they were giving to these banks that were under a lot of pressure, right? You're providing liquidity to banks to give to depositors so that they don't fail. Which I think is a form of stealth QE. Hey, what's up, Anand? It's 2 a.m. in India. Going to sleep? Yeah, makes sense. You can catch this later. It'll post as soon as it's done. So you can catch the interview with Vlad tomorrow. Yeah, they're basically showing that this wouldn't be represented on the balance sheet, but the net effect is similar. I wrote an investor letter like in 2022 that was mocked, discredited, ridiculed. People said I was incompetent, but I was trying to make the same point. I don't think I did a great job of that. But basically my whole reasoning for being bullish in 2022, multivariable, but one, not believing, like the Fed is mostly talk, and that there'd be so much fiscal government spending and running up deficits that would be inflationary, right? That money is coming from somewhere. If it's not coming from tax revenue, right, no increase in taxes, it has to either come through the money printer or through issuing more debt. And so despite interest rate rises, I was thinking liquidity would increase, and eventually a lot of that spending would work its way back into financial assets. And then because crypto is relatively smaller and you had all these products that would hook in the largest pool of capital in the world, the crypto markets, eventually you'd see rotation. Bitcoin would lead and altcoins would follow. This took way longer than I expected it to. But we should start to see Bitcoin dominance roll over. You're stealth watching while at work? Nice. Don't get caught, I guess. You like the song, Aaron? These are all supposed to be like AI, crypto themes. I actually didn't write the lyrics for this one, but I found, like, this is the only one that I can't take credit for these. But they're really good. I actually found some other songs and just wanted it to sound different, so I changed the music around it and the singer, but kept the lyrics. Hello, Yada. Crazy volatility, but there hasn't been that much volume. Slight increase, but not that significant above what it's been throughout this range. So ETH is still relatively struggling. YouTube moon. Yeah, Jeff, short-term time frame want to see 115, 116 break. But ultimately, yeah, it's these range highs, which once we get through this short-term volatility after an FOMC, I think we should see Litecoin continue higher against others. But it really should accelerate, even if it pulls back a little bit, once the broader market starts heading higher. A lot of these other alts were more heavily sold off, so you'd expect a decent bounce. But I think the trend is pretty set. A lot of these alts haven't retested their prior range highs, whereas Litecoin has. It should accelerate pretty fast, and then there's not that much resistance on the higher time frames. Sure, some at 185, 200, but I don't think it'll stall there for very long. Just because the relative attention for Litecoin, it should finally kind of take the spotlight in the crypto space at the time when the most people are buying, most new money is flooding, and Bitcoin's finally starting to make its way into alts. Hey, Ron. Last night your dreams you had a sweetie, then you woke up. Well, if Litecoin price goes up enough, you'll be able to find one. ETH is inert, and what's worrying about ETH, really, just to me, I think it probably does fine. But there's just so much leverage still on the long side for Ethereum. I think people want to get out of it too. I know a lot of people are getting bullish and are super bullish ETH, saying it's going to return back to the ETH BTC highs, but that's hard for me to imagine. You're seeing capitulation, but I still think it's a huge asset that it's going to be hard to move. Especially if other altcoins are pumping. It's not going to attract the same amount of attention it attracted when the potential upside from 100 was, you know, it had a 40x run. It can't do that again, nowhere close. So it's just not going to attract as much money. Same with Bitcoin. You're on. Yada says you can go to her dream. She might scare you though. You guys have any questions that you want to ask Vlad, just for later? You can post them so we have them prepared. I have some questions here for him, but if you guys have additional, you can ask him if he has enough time. I'll turn off the music when we talk to him as well. My foot fell asleep. That's a good question. Master, I'll write that down here. Audience questions. When Drivechain on Litecoin. Technical reasons why we shouldn't do it. Yeah, I'm sure it would, because Litecoin's already dominant on the monetary side of the space, payment space. Litecoin wants, or Yada wants Litecoin to go up now, please. Alright, I think if you just say it please, nicely like that, it'll happen. What's up, Vlad, or Mike, Vladimir, how you doing? Yada wants to go to Hawaii. Alright. We'll see. 2 weeks. You could find one now that just refuse to look. The environment's so bad. I think it's harder. Easier in some ways, but also internet. Everyone's online. You can't tell who real people are. And I don't know. I feel like with the echo chambers online, that standards for both sides are just kind of crazy. I think there's a lot of unrealistic expectations on both sides of the dating sphere. But what do I know? Does he still believe Bitcoin's the best vehicle for personal financial freedom? That's a good question. I'll ask him that too. Writing it down. The best vehicle for personal financial freedom, as he once did. That's exactly it. No meeting halfway anymore. Yeah, there's a lot of people online I've noticed. I'm not in that situation, but that complain about not having a relationship, but then also wanting some idealized version of whatever that is in their head, but not really wanting to do work. I'm sure maybe that's just like a westernized version of it, but it's sort of like high expectations and some sense of entitlement. Notice it most in like some of the more professional older female groups, and then so in younger guys too. 2 weeks. Yada knows the meme. 2 week. Chicken moon. It's not all that bad living single when you're older. Yeah, some people prefer that. It's all like personal preference. Yeah, definitely take care of your own health. Regardless if you're in a relationship or not, it's probably Oh, Vlad's here. Sorry, I was looking at my phone. 1 second. So we have a decent number of people in here. It looks like at least 33 on YouTube, and the X numbers are always messed up. It says 277, but who knows? Maybe about 30 people there too. So if you guys aren't familiar with Vlad, I'll reintroduce him real quick. He's been involved with Bitcoin for a long time. I'll let him explain this too, but he's at the Vlad Costea, I think that's how you say his last name, on X, and he hosts the Bitcoin Takeover podcast. Like I said earlier, it's a really good, more educational podcast on the original ethos and value proposition of Bitcoin that's kind of fallen out of favor to speculation and nonsense, really. But I would subscribe to his YouTube channel because his guests are top quality. Although a lot of the OGs of Bitcoin have become less popular over time, but I think there's a lot of signal there. But I will add him to the stage real quick, and then we'll start this. So I just added him. Let me see if this works. Hey Vlad, can you hear me?
Hi, yes.
Hey, how are you doing?
It's good to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm glad you were able to do it so quickly, because somebody asked yesterday on, let me turn this music down, on the stream, because I had reached out or made a comment on your post, but I can't remember. Maybe it got lost in notifications or I didn't see you respond. So I just sent you a message real quick after someone asked, and it seemed like you were available. So it worked out really well. I've wanted to have you on for a long time, so I appreciate you coming on here so quickly. What time is it for you right now in Romania?
Oh, it's just 11 p.m. It's not that bad.
Oh, okay.
Last night I had an interview, the latest podcast interview. I had that at around 2 in the morning, and I did that until 7 in the morning. It's pretty hardcore,
Oh,
when I
yeah.
go
Well,
live and I join one of these shows, I don't have a format, so I just talk with people until we run out of topics or else we get hungry or something.
well, that's kind of how
So
this is too. It's not that structured, so you're used to it, and I hope that's okay for you.
yeah, it's fine for me. I'm not sure about my girlfriend.
Oh.
Sometimes she patronizes me. She says, "Oh, Vlad, you were up all night again talking to your friends. I couldn't sleep." And I'm like, "Oh, I'm sorry."
That's the struggles of having a girlfriend. But the girlfriend experience, I've heard you talk about it quite a
Don't
bit
phrase it like
on
that.
X.
Girlfriend experience. It means
Okay, no,
something else.
oh, okay. Yeah, I guess that is a term that's not what I was trying to imply. But how has the dating life been? I know that's a weird opening question, but since you brought it up, um, life with a girlfriend, more pros than cons, I would imagine.
Yeah, I
Yeah,
like
it's
it.
been good.
I like her. She's great. She's very talented. She actually drew some Pepe avatars for a bunch of Litecoin community members. She's still available for freelancing, just so you know. If you want a
Okay, sweet.
Pepe, she's very talented.
I was gonna reach out actually because I want one for myself and my girlfriend. And I did notice
Wants one for himself as his girlfriend.
yeah, I can pay you for it, but I'll send
Not
you
me. It's her
or
hustle.
pay
I'm not
her.
involved in that.
Yeah, that's cool.
My
She does a
hustle is
good.
actually one that's less profitable. It's called the Bitcoin Takeover Litecoin Edition magazine. I launched this in Nashville last year, and I was expecting a much, I guess, I was expecting more people to download this, to take interest into reading it. It's
Mhm.
basically, I think, so this is number 25 out of 30. It's from the first batch. I expected more stuff or more people to read this because it has articles about why Litecoin matters, how you can run a node, how you can mine, which pool you should be choosing, how MWeb works, what it is, some proposals that might be coming to Litecoin, like Drivechains. And it's really nice, honestly. Like, I paid a guy quite a lot for this to materialize. And it has nice
Mhm.
graphics, it has articles, even something about the Lightning Network on Litecoin, which some people may not remember, but originally Lightning happened on Litecoin. And also some quotes from Charlie Lee from the interview that we recorded about MWeb and privacy. You can download this for free. So I don't have any physical copies except for this one left. I think Kyle from 84 million was selling them in his shop. But you can download this for free. It's open source, and that's the beauty of it. And I actually made this cover. It's inspired by the album Wish You Were Here by Pink Floyd, with Bitcoin and Litecoin shaking hands, and they're sort of samurai in the style of Dragon Ball Z.
That's awesome. Where can they download it? Is it on your
You can
page
scan this
somewhere?
QR code, I think.
Oh, okay. Cool.
But it's on btctkvr.com or bitcointakeover.com, and there is a magazine menu, a drop-down menu. You just click that, and after it, you're gonna see Litecoin in there. Or bitcoin-takeover.com/Litecoin. I think that's an easy way for you to access this for free. And you can read it,
Sweet.
you can spread it around. It's also been added, I think, to litecoin.org. There's an education section on litecoin.org, and you can find the magazine not directly, so without the graphics. It's just the articles themselves were put there because I guess the people from the Litecoin Foundation liked it.
That's cool. This is really cool. Yeah, it's super high quality. The graphics, even like the animation that you made here is cool. And it's like a comprehensive, graphically appealing, but also highly dense information about all the things that are interesting with Litecoin, at least from the launch till all the way up through MWeb. So it's super cool. You guys should go download it since it is open source and free. Read it.
No,
I was
open source
impressed
means that you can download, you
when you
can modify,
originally
you can
did all
print your
this
own,
work
you can sell it.
and went to the Litecoin Summit to present it. I mean, we haven't really had that high quality of content ever made for this community. So it's super cool. Thanks for your hard work on this stuff and also making it fun and engaging.
Yeah, and once again, it's free. It's free
Well,
information. I put it out there. I just want people to be able to access good information about how Litecoin works. Spread this around. I think one of the barriers in the way of adoption is just people understanding what this is. And for better and for worse, Litecoin is being used, but people have very low conviction in the project. So it's sort of an intermediary coin that people use because of the low fees and large acceptance across payments processors and exchanges. So they use it for swapping or whatever. I think it's also a pretty underrated privacy coin. If you really want to swap to Monero or something, or you want to swap Monero into something you can spend in more places, you can swap XMR for LTC on MWeb. I think that's a really interesting use case. Pretty
for
sure
sure,
Cake
yeah.
Wallet might have that.
Yeah, I think they do. I have heard a lot of people talk about this and even seen it in some of these like decentralized exchanges or DEXs where that's the most popular trading pair, LTC to XMR. But definitely a use case. It drives adoption for both of those cryptocurrencies. And I think naturally that's always the way I imagined this for cryptocurrencies to proliferate. Anything that's promoting decentralization, swaps between chains, will help both projects grow, right? The use case of just getting XMR through using Litecoin doesn't just help XMR, it helps Litecoin too. So that's kind of cool. I wanted to ask you because I semi-structure these, and we've done a few, but it's been a few months since I had my last interview. But I was really curious because I haven't talked to you before. I've just heard things and listened to some of your podcasts explaining how you got involved in this space. But I was wondering if you could explain in your own words kind of how you first were introduced to Bitcoin and what attracted you to these like libertarian free market type ideals, if you don't mind.
I guess I've been a libertarian for most of my life, even if I did not know the word. Like, I had no idea this existed, that there was a movement. But I've always wanted grown-ups to leave me alone, since I was a child. I was like, just leave me alone. I can handle this. Stop patronizing me. Stop telling me what to do. And when I was in university, I was thinking of myself as a classical liberal, which is close to today's libertarian movement. It's just that in the US, you have a much stronger movement in terms of libertarianism. And here in Europe, it's pretty socialist in some parts. Like, there are some elements of the state apparatus that cannot even be debated. Like, how dare you say we should not have this subsidized by the government or whatever. So when you grow in this environment, of course, you ask a lot of questions, but you also don't really engage in too much intellectual conversation about what it means to be truly free and to have lower taxes and whatever. So I did discover Bitcoin in 2013. It was on a meme page that's called 9gag. I got my alpha from a meme page. And at the time, there was this meme. I think the price went down or something. And it was a comic book made by. It's a series called Cyanide and Happiness, I think. Cyanide and Happiness. You got to look that up. And the first panel of the strip comic says, "Give me all your money." The second one says, "I don't have any money. I just have Bitcoin." And then in the last panel, the thief gives some cash to the Bitcoin guy and says, "Here, you need this more than me." And I was curious at the time. I was like, what is this Bitcoin? And after my 10-minute research on the Wikipedia page, on the bitcoin.org page, I think, I don't remember. It's a long time ago when I was young. I was like, this is stupid. Why would anyone ever want to use this? Like, why would you want to invent this form of money? At the time, the narrative about Bitcoin is that it's gonna bank the unbanked. Today, I realized that I'm gonna get debanked because I dealt with Bitcoin and my bank sent me a very interesting email, pretty long one, about because I sold some coins to buy my car, and apparently they're not happy that I cannot provide proof of origin for the coins. Like, where do they come from? And I'm like, who knows? It's been so many years ago. I don't keep documents. At the time, the regulations were different. It's this year that they brought some new rules, and it's pretty insane. It's intense. I guess I'm gonna be debanked. I'm gonna be one of those true libertarians who say, "Oh, I don't use banks," and blah blah blah. I don't know how that's gonna work with accounting and taxes, but yeah,
I
they
see.
don't give me much of a choice.
Yeah, that was an interesting narrative to me, and I've been involved for a while. Maybe not as long as 2013, but first read about it in 2015 and didn't really get fully involved till late 2016. But that narrative was popular back then, like banking the unbanked in all these smaller countries. But when I was thinking about it, I always thought Bitcoin's value prop and crypto's value prop was sort of debanking the banked, because governments heavily regulate all these financial institutions and eventually can just eradicate the value prop of Bitcoin out of their markets that they have jurisdiction over. So it was always a confusing narrative to me too. And yeah, now as governments, and I think Europe's getting more crazy on the regulatory side than some other countries. It might be just that it people wanting to involve in the cryptocurrency world may end up being forcefully debanked, but it's not a terrible issue to have. But what were your first, like, you kind of explained your first early impressions of Bitcoin? Why would somebody want to use it? And maybe I didn't listen well enough, but what eventually got you convinced that, oh, this is something that I need to pay attention to focus my time on and really try to understand how it works and where it's going?
It was the market. It's always the market. It's
Mm-hmm.
something that humbles you. It's something that proves to you that your assumptions were wrong. And much more than this, 10 years ago, so 2015, no, 9 years ago, I wanted to buy my first Bitcoin, right? I actually had some savings. And I went online and I searched Bitcoin, and I saw this piece of news that a very important developer in Bitcoin rage quit. And he said that it's a failed project and there's no way this is going to succeed. At the time, the price was under $500, I think. And I said to myself, I'm so smart that I did not invest into this.
Mm-hmm.
And I wasn't really, because the next year after this, the price went back to $1,000, and which was the previous all-time high. And the fact that this happened proved to me that, okay, there's something here that mainstream media has been lying to me about or has been misleading me,
Mm-hmm.
When you have this moment where there's a disconnect between what you have been told and what you learn in university and whatever about what is right, and then you see that the markets are not following through. So if there's this glitch, there's this breach, it's what made me curious about what this really is and how it works. So I guess you can call me part of the 2017 class based
Mm-hmm.
on this criterion. I did find out about Bitcoin earlier. I did do a presentation about Bitcoin. Ironically, when I was an exchange student in Paris, one of the professors gave us an assignment. It was for a class on advocacy for new and emerging technologies. And actually had to do a presentation about Bitcoin and blockchain. And I did the bare minimum to actually get a passing grade. I treated this just like homework,
Mm-hmm.
And I guess it's been in the back of my mind, but I wish I bought some at the time. I really wish I did.
Yeah, for
Because
sure.
I had all the information. I had all the reasons to do it, but I ended up not doing it because
Yep.
I just thought it was work for university to get a passing grade, and that was it. That's why I'm also skeptical of all these Bitcoin diplomas and whatever educational programs. Like, okay, there are people who genuinely want to learn and
Mm-hmm.
they sign up for these classes. But on the other hand, if it's mandatory and it's not fun and you're not discovering something new and you're not passionate about what you're doing, it's only for some diploma or for some passing grade, it's not great. You're gonna do
Yeah,
the bare minimum.
for sure. And I think these educational institutions are usually not good in the areas of like innovation and looking forward. They can teach you well about the past and some useful skills like engineering or whatever, some specific science, but not necessarily. They don't do a great job of looking towards the future, right? Like all the most successful tech entrepreneurs like Steve Jobs or Bill Gates, they didn't they weren't going to learn very much in school, and they realized that early, and Bill Gates dropped out. So it's similar, and I would agree with you.
No,
My
I'm not
story,
gonna compare myself to that because I'm not that successful, or at least not yet. I don't know.
oh yeah, well I mean just in general, the concept that uh, yeah, but we're not at that level, but as far as learning much through a university about some new technology, I wouldn't trust the university to give me the right answer there. I had the same experience with going through finance school, finance and accounting. I felt like, yeah, I was just doing the bare minimum to get a passing grade. But a lot of the things and assumptions they were making in economics courses, when I really thought about it, it didn't make sense to me, and that's how I got involved in Austrian economics and learning about Bitcoin. Um, but it's cool. We have about the same time frame for really starting to focus on cryptocurrency in general. So after you discovered Bitcoin, kind of wishing you bought it early and then eventually buying it later on, did you initially subscribe to kind of the Bitcoin maximalism ideals? I know originally that was enticing to me as well, but what's your story on how you evolved over time from Bitcoin only to now talking about multiple cryptocurrencies?
Oh no, I bought all the shit coins and I tried
Oh.
ICOs. 2017 was wild. And I was very happy that I think around November I made a lot of money, which I lost most of it in December. I think I barely broke even. It was a
Mhm.
very wild year. Like, I remember even in September, Jamie Dimon said that Bitcoin is a pyramid scheme or something, and the price
Mhm.
went down from, I think it was
It was like
5,000 and it went to
3,000.
3,000.
Yeah.
Yeah, wild times.
Yeah, I remember that.
I remember checking my portfolio at the time thinking, my God, this might be over. This might be it. Now when Bitcoin goes down by 2 or 3,000, it's just nothing. It's part of
For sure.
the daily volatility. But yeah, I remember that, and I participated in lots of ICOs. I got wrecked. I guess now the term for getting wrecked is rug pulled. I think that's
Mhm.
the fancy lexicon for that. And yeah, I bought some Litecoin, but I sort of bought it close to the top, close to $300. I bought some Neo that never went anywhere. It was supposed to be the Ethereum killer.
Yep.
Nem, what else was there? EOS was a big one. It was the one that was running an ICO, and it took about 1 year for it to launch, and it never really went anywhere. There was a lot of hype initially, and then, of course, the assumptions about it were wrong. It's just that this sum of experiences that gets you to the point where you say, if I actually bought Bitcoin and didn't do all of this trading and didn't panic sell and didn't buy that new and shiny thing, I would probably be better off right now. So that's I think what leads you to Bitcoin maximalism. And
For
it
sure.
coincided with the rise of the movement because after the 2017 ICO mania, there was more of a rationalization of what's going on in the following year. We've seen how the price of Bitcoin went from $20,000 to 3,000 something from January until December of 2018. And I think that brought a lot of humbleness into the market and made everyone question their incentives and try to understand why are we even here, Because
Mhm.
it's always difficult to explain and rationalize your involvement in the space. You got to ask yourself, am I just here to get rich, to make some money?
Mhm.
Am I here for a vague description of what this technology is about? And I'm going to think of ways to use blockchains for everything because that was still a narrative at the time to put everything on a blockchain. Or is this a bit more? Like, is this about personal freedom? Is this about trying to not use banks or trying to be ahead of the rest of the financial technology sector? There are lots of reasons for this, but I was genuinely hoping at the time that Bitcoin is going to be the one that does everything because that's part of the maximalist thesis, right? When you believe that whatever is happening on altcoins is just an experiment for what's coming to Bitcoin later. And
Mhm.
I still hope that this is going to happen. It's just that every day it seems less likely. Not just because there's a culture that was built around this idea of ossification, never changing, not messing with the money layer, and blah, 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 but also because the actors who get involved, and I do believe that if there's going to be this strategic Bitcoin reserve that maybe will happen in the US, if we do get that, I think that's the final nail in the coffin of Bitcoin development. I don't think we're going to get much more development after that. Because when you have a stakeholder that is the most powerful military and propaganda power in the world, you're not gonna get through with anything related to scalability or privacy or whatever.
For sure.
And that's unfortunate. But on the plus side, you have all of these networks which are not scams. They're not like the ICOs of 2017, or they're not like the NFT collections of 2021 or the meme coins of today. They actually have some fundamentals. They have a real community. They have a real use case. They actually have technology that was, for better and for worse, proposed for Bitcoin initially, and it was not added for reasons which mostly concern the conservatism of the Bitcoin community. And those projects sort of give me hope. Like, I've
Mhm.
interviewed Charlie Lee, I've interviewed David Burkett, and who else did I have from the Litecoin community on my show? Anyway, my point is that I do understand that there's a market for this. And
Mm-hmm.
if we're going to have, ideally, the Bitcoin maximalist thesis says that not only that you're going to have all the features on Bitcoin with sidechains or rollups or layer twos, whatever, but you're also going to have an entire economy, an entire global economy that's going to be based on the 21 million supply. And it's going to operate with this limited supply of money. I think that's the most optimistic and positive side of it, but it's also the least likely to happen. If we're going to have Bitcoin alongside 5 or 6 other coins that are useful for various reasons, one for contracts, one for privacy, one for low fees and fast transactions, and maybe a few others for experiments, I think it's not such a bad world. It's honestly much better than the one that we have currently. And if
Yeah,
you
for
have
sure.
seamless swaps between the chains and easy ways to get on and off these networks, it's going to be pretty cool. It's just that we are stuck forever in this phase of experimentation price discovery. And
Mm-hmm.
every cycle, there's a new trend and a new idea. It seems like the old coins. Yesterday, I interviewed Ruben Yap, and he's been involved for like 9 years with the Zcoin project. Zcoin was based on the Zero Coin paper that was actually a 2013 proposal to improve Bitcoin's privacy with zero knowledge proofs. It was too experimental for its time. It became a chain of its own. So you had Zcoin, and a couple of weeks later, you had Zcash. I think Zcash is more famous now.
Mm-hmm.
And these two were basically implementations of this idea of using zero knowledge proofs on blockchains. The idea was also suggested by Satoshi, but when Satoshi Nakamoto was active on Bitcoin Talk and was the lead maintainer of the project, there was not enough cryptographic research in this field of zero knowledge proofs. Now we have it, and it's been about a decade since this one got proposed, and it's been the subject of experimentation. Where I was going with this is that you have these projects that were popular in their time and the price went to the moon, and now it's 99% down or even more compared to
Mm-hmm.
the all-time high or against Bitcoin, but you still have people working on them and
Mm-hmm.
they've survived for at least 2 bear markets. I think that's a point where you can argue for sure that they're not scams and they're here to stay and they're actually doing something interesting and possibly useful, experimenting for the entire space. Because not too many people get this, but it's open source software. We
Mm-hmm.
can build a religion around money and we can say that this money is better than the other and this network is holy and the other one is not. But at the end of the day, it's all sort of like Linux, where you have a Linux distribution for security, you have a Linux distribution for managing servers, you have one for everyday use and entertainment, video games, whatever. You have a version of Linux for pretty much everything, but they're based on sort of the same kernel. And it's the same with this whole blockchain industry. You have different networks that serve different purposes. Of course, there are some scams. Of course, there are some situations where you question the legitimacy of the project. But I think after they pass this threshold of maybe 10 years of being around and still having a market, still having a community, still having developers, you can say for sure that they're going to be around and none of these guys are trying to scam you. They're trying to build something, even if it doesn't have the market demand that they expected, because trends come and go. Now it's
Mm-hmm.
trendy and you attract a lot of eyes and investors. And a few years later, you realize that there's a new trend coming. And maybe that it's cyclical and there's going to be a return for privacy coins or for these old networks. There's going to be some sort of acknowledgement that they do provide value and they're useful for a lot of people.
Yeah, for sure. I agree, and I've always tried to make that point for a long time. In that same as you. These are open source networks. Really, they're competing for network effects and users, but it's hard for the vast majority of market participants to really separate the speculative portion of this market, the casino part of the market that is dictating price action to a large degree versus like what's happening on the monetary or monetization sector or side of this market. It's so hard, I think, for the vast majority of people to separate those two things, and people get distracted by price, and the narratives follow price, and people get caught up in hype cycles. And there are a lot of altcoins that have, or a few at least, that have grown in network effects, but their price has lagged. I think Litecoin's one of the best examples of that, or the best in terms of its relative undervaluation compared to its network activity. And I think I agree with you as well, what you were saying about having multiple options for people is honestly the best. I know the Bitcoin maximalist ideology was that we want this one form of money to rule the world. It's the most efficient. If we could just have everyone on the same chain, it's like this utopian type imagination that they have, and I can understand why they would get to that conclusion, but I always tried to make the point that a competitive market for money is not inflationary. People think altcoins are inflations to Bitcoin, but to me, there's no such thing as inflation in a competitive market. People will use whatever's most useful, and naturally, if you do have the best money, if Bitcoin actually is, then you'd see the most demand for it. It would compete on its own. You don't need all these people online shouting about it. So I agree with you on those 2 points that you made. It is interesting to see, to me, kind of how loud the Bitcoin maximalist group has been recently about the Ripple influence over the government. Recently, Brad Garlinghouse was trying to get Ripple included in their lobbying and spending money on trying to get that project included in the strategic reserve. What are your views on the government's involvement? Like, are you pro a Bitcoin strategic reserve? I think you alluded to you not really being the case. But what are your thoughts on all these altcoins trying to vie or push their projects into the hands of government as well?
I think that's a bit stupid. It's gonna defeat the purpose. Like, what's the expectation that governments are gonna have strong hands and they're gonna hold this for 10 years and stabilize the price or something? I think that governments are gonna rug you. And the moment when elections happen and there's a change in terms of the party that is in charge, there's gonna be something massive in terms of the sell-off that will happen. I don't know. I just don't get the point. This technology was invented with the purpose, initially as described by the Bitcoin white paper, to make internet commerce more easy and to make chargebacks impossible, and to also provide a sense or a degree of privacy to the people sending money around the internet. And then they started rationalizing around this idea of saving in Bitcoin and using it for speculatively making more money over time, which so far has worked pretty well. And then they got to the point where I think Bitcoin needs this. And it's sort of sad to acknowledge it, because the greatest bet of the Nakamoto consensus is the one that's described in the white paper, that over time you're going to have transaction fees compensating for the diminishing block rewards, as you're going to get lower rewards every 4 years, and that's 210,000 blocks. You're also going to bet that you're going to have a lot of activity on the chain to pay the miners. And so far, that has not been the case. We haven't seen exponentially more on-chain transactions as more people bought Bitcoin, because most of the activity is happening on exchanges, most of the trading. Very few people actually take their coins into self-custody, and that's part of the ugly truth, that you don't really have many people who care about this stuff. They just buy it in their I guess there are some banking application nowadays that let you buy some Bitcoin derivatives. And it's not real Bitcoin, it's just something that lets you enjoy the volatility of the Bitcoin token. So honestly, I don't see the point of this happening. It was made to liberate us, and now we're just going to government saying, please, daddy government, buy some coins from
Yeah,
me. Please, please, pump my bags. It's stupid. But
I agree.
I do get the point because, as I was saying, the price needs to double every 4 years to make up for the diminishing supply.
Hmm.
Not supply, the diminishing rewards. So
Hmm.
if we're not going to get more transaction fees, and this is also due to the fact that we decided to keep the block size small in Bitcoin, and I don't see a willingness to pay very large fees. There was one when there were some ordinal inscriptions that paid a lot of money to get minted on Bitcoin. It's just that a bunch of guys chased away these users and told them that they're not legitimate and they're spamming the blockchain. And now they sort of stopped. I don't see much of that happening anymore. So,
For sure.
who is really willing to pay for transaction fees? So far, it's not been a large existential problem, but maybe one day we're not going to see the price doubling every 4 years and we're
Hmm.
going to need more transactions. And how do you do that? It's a good question. Are we going to activate drive chains finally? I hope so. But
Yeah, what are
I
your
guess,
thoughts on that long term? Because the security hash rate has to be paid either by, yeah, this constant doubling of price every 4 years, or making up for doubling in, or whatever, increase in transaction fees to compensate for that. What happens if the speculative casino market kind of goes away, Bitcoin price starts falling, and transaction fees aren't increasing at the levels people would want? How do you foresee the future? Because to me, that seems like the most likely, once this, like, 100% year-over-year gains have been possible, and a lot of this is momentum driving price action and new narratives and bigger pools of capital getting access to Bitcoin. But I think we're reaching the zenith of that with governments and institutions buying. Um, what do you think happens to Bitcoin if price starts falling and we don't see, at least right away, a willingness to pay transaction fees?
oh, the first result is going to be that some miners are going to drop out. And this means that the hash rate is going to be lower for a while until we're going to get what's the amount of blocks in 2 weeks.
I don't know exactly, so one every
I
25
used to know.
seconds.
Anyway, it's 6 blocks per hour multiplied by
Mm-hmm.
24 hours multiplied by 14
7,
days. You can do
14.
the math on that one. So you're going to have to wait until you get that number of blocks to be able to have the difficulty readjustment. And I guess we could work in theory with a lower hash rate with some of these farms shutting down. Is it more vulnerable to 51% attacks? Absolutely, especially now that we have these large mining farms and pools that are based in one jurisdiction and they are vulnerable to a government's, I guess, I don't know how I should describe this. If a government tells you that you should do something and you don't comply and all of your gears are within the territory of that government,
Mm-hmm.
we need more decentralization in terms of mining, and we
For
never
sure.
really got that. There used to be the case that too much mining was happening in China. Now too much mining is happening in the US. It's not like other parts of the world really embraced mining as an activity. Maybe that they should, but there
For
was
sure.
more investment in the token itself with more investors and companies and also countries buying Bitcoin or holding Bitcoin that they confiscated from their citizens as opposed to investing in mining. So that's going to be something important. If there is not enough security and there is demand for more fees, one solution that I think is the last resort and the one that is going to break the social contract is to add tail emission.
Mm-hmm.
To have more than 21 million coins The assumption behind this, as described in not a white paper, but a research paper by Peter Todd, is that there are so many coins that were lost that it's gonna take hundreds of years of tail emission until you actually get to a point where you have more than 21 million coins in circulation.
I see.
Of course, there are more than 21 million coins issued, but are they in circulation to affect the market? Not really. I think that's the most unpopular of proposals. It's also the one that technically makes most sense when you think about the fact that markets are unpredictable and there is never constant supply. No, there is never constant demand for anything, even if the supply is limited. I'm not sure if you remember that stock to flow crazy model that was being
Yeah.
promoted a few years ago, which
Oh, yeah.
assumed that if the demand is constant and well known, no, if the supply is constant and well known, then the demand will follow and it's also gonna remain constant or else increase over time. Well, there's not even equal demand for bread or milk or
For
fruits
sure.
or something that's essential for living. Even that one fluctuates over time, and there are moments when people have more of it, have less of it, and it's hard to predict. I
Yep.
wish
I
there
agree.
were enough transactions to secure these networks, both Bitcoin and Litecoin, without these subsidies that are coming in the form of programmed inflation. We don't really call that, we say block rewards, but what they really are part of this schedule for emission. So it's not technically wrong to say that right now Bitcoin and Litecoin are secured by inflation as programmed by the system.
Yeah.
They're gonna reach a point in the future where the subsidy is very low and does not make up for what's happening. I think Litecoin made a pretty interesting decision and it turned out to be successful and useful on the long term when they took Dogecoin and decided that it's going to be merged mined with Litecoin. I think that's part of the reason why Litecoin is not facing an existential crisis right now, because the price didn't really go up. It's still at maybe 2017, 2018 levels. It didn't keep up with the appreciation that we have seen in Bitcoin. So LTC BTC has been going down, but it's been fine because of Dogecoin. I think Dogecoin sort of saved Litecoin over the short to medium term. Now, I don't know, maybe Dogecoin is going to get bigger. Right now, there is a department in the US government that's called Doge.
Yeah, it's possible. How do you feel about? I always looked at absolute hash rate as one metric of security. So like for double spend protection, the higher hash rate you have, the less time you need to wait to be sure that X high value transaction is not going to be double spent. But then there's another aspect of security that I think is only provided by fees, the kind of the censorship resistant aspect. That I've always looked at these cryptocurrencies, proof of work, permissionless, censorship resistant monies like Bitcoin and Litecoin, to really thrive in the most volatile and kind of world where we're at conflict with one another, where governments are printing a lot of money, creating a lot of inflation, and then in order to force people to pay that inflation tax, they may come up with more regulations to restrict and force people to use their money. And like you were saying with mining, if it becomes too centralized in one jurisdiction, they can blacklist transactions or require the miners to do KYC and not confirm certain transactions that aren't approved. But naturally, the way I see this playing out is this is a speculative market. Will eventually exit the casino phase. Price will go down. Governments likely print a lot of money. It changes individual incentives around the world to try to escape that inflation tax. And then people really realize the value prop of Bitcoin. And then if it gets adopted, that's when you would run into that real value prop of censorship resistance being realized. And to me, the only way you overcome that is through the fee market. So transactors keep increasing their fees enough to naturally decentralize the mining market, right? People will look at these fees that are on these transactions that are unconfirmed and then maybe set up decentralized mining infrastructure to go take that profit. So like this long-term security argument about creating inflation or adding a tail mission never made that much sense to me, because I think most people are making that argument to try to keep price going up. They want hash rate to stay the same or people to keep mining, but the net effect on price would be the same, right? If you increase the tail emissions, you're taxing technically the holders of the money, so you may deter speculation, to try to bring down transaction fee levels or encourage more transactions. But like the net effect from an economics perspective to me is that the price would be the same regardless if you add tail emissions or not. This question is kind of convoluted, but what I was trying to ask is on the merge mining sector, yes, it provides more double spend protection, but ultimately, at least from my view, I always thought that really what's going to provide censorship resistance and ultimately security to whatever network, whether it's merge mined or not, like Litecoin or Dogecoin, would be people willing to pay transaction fees to get their transactions through the network and processed. How do you look at merge mining long term? Because it's a debate that's been ongoing in the cryptocurrency community, especially with Litecoin and Dogecoin, and now Bell's coins merge mined. But I always thought that it was sort of overvalued in a sense, in that just because something's merged mined doesn't make it more absolutely secure. If Dogecoin, even though it's gone up in price and gone up and been promoted by Elon Musk and there's a lot of hype around it, it's actually decreased in real economic transactions on the chain since 2020. So I think it was at like 60,000 transactions a day prior to Elon Musk talking about it a lot. And now if you remove the ordinals or doginals inscriptions, it's at like 30K a day. But hash rate has gone up a lot because price has gone up a lot, and people will add hash rate to the system until that profit margin comes down. But long term, do you see this merge mining concept being protective of multiple networks at the same time, like actually increasing the total hash rate? Do you see that as a long-term security benefit to both chains, or do you see what I'm trying to say in that really it's fees that drive the censorship resistant aspect of the money?
That's a long and very good question. I don't think I have a definitive answer for this, except that merge mining was invented by Satoshi Nakamoto for the purpose of having the first altcoin ever, which was Namecoin. That one was supposed to decentralize domain names, so you could actually use Bitcoin or Namecoin to buy domains. And I think the issue with that one was that people were just spamming and registering, squatting on domains because they got involved early on. And it was also not supported by browsers because that's another element. They were going to have I think it was .bit domains. And that never went anywhere because you need some sort of browser to recognize that you're using that domain and redirect to the page. And yeah, merged mining has been around for a long time, since 2010 or something. I don't know why it did not get more popularity. I know that BIP 301, which is tied to the activation of Drivechains, is describing this process of blind merged mining, where miners don't see what's happening in the blocks that are being sent to them. And I do like overall the idea of drive chains. I think the market should definitely test this. And It's also sort of maximalist when you enable drive chains and you are able to have everything on the same money system. Of course, you're going to have experiments that are going to push the development of what these sidechains are doing, but I think the value of the currency is going to go up and more developers are going to start playing with features. And I do understand the criticism that this can lead to perverting the mining incentives, and this can also lead to miners stealing from these chains. But miners are some of the most honest and they have the most skin in the game. They're some of the most honest actors that we have. They can 51% attack, they can collude to activate soft forks if they want, or they can deactivate soft forks that they don't like that were proposed by the community. But they don't. They don't want to take on that role. They would rather play the long game and collect their fees, collect their block subsidy. So far,
Mm-hmm.
it's been like this. And the miners are some of the most ideological and convicted, not convicted in terms of, going to prison, but the ones with the strongest conviction.
For sure. Yeah, the earliest holders that have the coins first, they obviously want the price of them to go up. So I would imagine, yeah, the economic incentives are aligned. Are there any valid technical reasons why we shouldn't do drive chains that you're aware of outside of what you just mentioned about the potential misalignment of economic incentives or miner stealing? Are there any reasons like stopping this from being implemented on something like Litecoin?
It's a bit political. For example, David Burkett is against it in principle because he believes that you should not make a chain general purpose. He thinks that the current direction, and I think it has to do a lot with marketing, right? Because right now, Litecoin is the coin for payments and it's being promoted as such. Once you also have smart contracts and Zcash level privacy and domains and prediction markets and all of these other chains, it can get a bit confusing for the end user. I do believe it should be tested. I do believe that there should be a signal from the market and we should see this in production on some chain. Maybe that the Litecoin community believes that their network is too valuable at this point to start experimentation. Honestly, I think it can be something that revitalizes building on Litecoin and can bring more developers, because if they have to choose between, let's say, building on something like Solana versus building on something which has a much wider adoption across payments processors and exchanges, they might try their creations on Litecoin. I wish this
Yeah,
was
for
on
sure.
Bitcoin, but the opposition against it is way too strong. And it also gets confusing, I guess, because you're going to have a different ticker for every sidechain. So, for example, you're going to have a privacy sidechain which uses the Zcash cryptography. And that one cannot be called LTC, just like the base layer LTC. So it will be like ZLTC or
Mm-hmm.
something. So maybe it can lead to some confusion, or it can even lead to some chains having more valuable coins, if that makes sense, because people have more demand for that particular use case than the other. But there's going to be some balance on the markets. There's going to be a point of equilibrium, and I guess this also opens up the market for swapping services, because maybe there's a user who wanted to get on the big block sidechain but realized that suddenly he's more into smart contracts and he's going to want to exit the large block sidechain to join the smart contract one. Except that there's a lock time for these sidechains and he cannot exit with his exact UTXO liquidity. But he can swap it with somebody else, and there
Mm-hmm.
can be this swapping service that takes like 1% or something, and he can give to you access to the coins on another sidechain. So it
Mm-hmm.
does open up these use cases and these business opportunities for people who want to build. Maybe it can be a bit confusing in terms of user experience, but it does bring everything. It's sort of opening up the free market to see what kind of inventions are in demand, and most importantly, what people want to build and use on
For
that
sure.
particular monetary layer.
Well, I feel
And
like if there's no risk to the, sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
I do get the point that you have the extension block with Mimblewimble. If you want to scale Litecoin, you don't have to hard fork the base layer to increase the block size. You can just increase the block size on MWeb, and you can onboard people directly on MWeb, and it's pretty cool. But there's something to be said about the fact that Mimblewimble is not as great as Zcash for privacy. The cryptography of Zcash is much more advanced. It's much more efficient for scalability, on the other hand. So there are various trade offs involved. So there is a competing situation between potentially having a Zcash sidechain and having this extension block with Mimblewimble. So maybe that there's a bit of a conflict here. But otherwise, I would love to see smart contracts using Litecoin. I would love to see domains that are being registered using Litecoin, and just
For sure.
opening up the market to see, okay, who really wants this to happen? Does this idea have merit? It can be exciting.
Yeah, I agree. It encourages entrepreneurship. People have various ideas. Probably things would be invented that nobody can think of right now. And as long as it doesn't pose any risk to the main chain, I don't see why it shouldn't be tried out. I think the more experimentation, the better. Even if it fails and doesn't work, sure, people might lose coins experimenting on these side chains or drive chains, but they're not going to put everything in. And I think innovating and experimenting is better than doing nothing. As long as that's true. Do you know why the Bitcoiners opposed it? Were there technical arguments against it potentially like messing up the main Bitcoin blockchain, or was it just that they didn't want people to be confused in the marketing side of it?
It's a bit of everything. I've heard arguments against it that come from people who say, mining is just not decentralized enough. And we should wait for a point in the future where you have more jurisdictions and you have more ASIC manufacturers and you have more companies that are mining, or individuals or whatever. There are also people who are concerned that, and they actually refer to it as such, that issuing these tokens on other side chains are gonna turn into shitcoins. And I've heard this from John Carvalho on the stage of Baltic Honey Badger. He said, this is gonna bring shitcoins to Bitcoin. And there are two ways of interpreting this. On one hand, that you're gonna have these pegged tokens that are pegged one to the base layer, and they're going to provide the extra features, and maybe that you're not going to have all of the businesses that accept LTC on the base layer also accepting LTC on the Zcash sidechain. Maybe you're going to have that situation. So therefore, maybe momentarily on the market, you're going to sell the Zcash Litecoin for a cheaper price than the ones that you can spend, because people want something they can spend quickly and they don't have the patience to exit that sidechain. But you can also interpret this in terms of believing that everything that was not built for Bitcoin and has been experimented on other chains is shitcoin technology, which seems to be a prevalent idea within the Bitcoin maximalist community. That if it's not built specifically for Bitcoin and it's been tried for many years on other chains, then it's potentially scammy, or it's just not good enough, and Bitcoin should have something dedicated that is special or whatever.
I see. Yeah, I mean I am for it, but obviously I don't have the technical competence to really understand the risks involved. It sucks in Bitcoin land. There's only a handful of individuals that really have this technical competence of potential risks associated with any sort of upgrade or change. and then you have debates within those people that are technically competent. So it's hard for like an outsider to really assess the risk accurately, which I think is just tough. And then if you do have political incentives, and developers might even have their own biases, right? We've seen it happen with a lot of the really smart people who were involved in Bitcoin early that became maximalists. It's like they're very smart from a computer science perspective, but then also sort of still vulnerable to specific ideologies. So it's really hard to gain a true understanding when you're an outsider, kind of normal person that doesn't have that graduate or postgraduate level of computer science expertise. So it's
You
hard for
also
all
have
of
to
us.
understand that this ideology, for lack of a better word, is convenient. When you're in a position where you want to extract more money, more investors, more something from what's out there, of course you're going to call everything else a scam and say that only the stuff that you're building is the legit one and the one that will last for the ages and the one that matters, you know?
Mm-hmm.
It's like this. I mean, today, I'm not sure how many people listening to this are aware or were around at the time, but Warren Togami was one of the biggest Litecoin developers
Yep.
back in 2013 or something. And nowadays, he doesn't even mention Litecoin anymore. He's involved with Blockstream. He's in a position where he's basically denying the existence of Litecoin, even though he spent a couple of years working on it and improving it. And the fact that he improved Litecoin also improved some vulnerability and security issues that were prevalent in Bitcoin at the time. I found this from, I don't want to get you into this rabbit hole, but there was this John Dillon situation from 2013 with an email exchange between Peter Todd and the supposed intelligence agent John Dillon. I spent like 3 hours on this one a couple of weeks ago, and it's been on my mind ever since. Because in the middle of this email exchange, you also find Warren Togami at the time, and he basically brags about finding some bugs in the Bitcoin node software that he fixed on the Litecoin project and then provided the fix to Bitcoin. And he was also searching for funding, and this John Dillon guy was sort of a big shot who was giving Bitcoin here and there, saying that he wants this technology to improve and succeed. His greatest merit was that of influencing the CoinJoin bounty from 2013, when there was Greg Maxwell, and this guy Greg Maxwell, alongside two other Bitcoin Core developers, Peter Willey and the other one was Tamos, they decided to put some Bitcoin together and give a reward, a bounty, to the first developer or team of developers who's going to come up with a privacy wallet that uses the CoinJoin technology. And the first proposal for this was from Dark Wallet that was developed by Amir Taki. I think he came up with that software just a couple of weeks after the announcement was posted. But for some reason, John Dillon didn't like Amir Taki's work. It had to do with something that's called LibBitcoin, which is an alternative Bitcoin Core client that he actually wrote from scratch and developed. He didn't like the existence of LibBitcoin, and therefore he donated money to the bounty in order to persuade the creators of the bounty to also take his opinion into account when they decide this. And I think that was one of the earliest moments when someone with some Bitcoin came along and said, you know, just because I put this money here, it means that I have a seat at the table and I have an important word to say in what's going to happen. And long story short, that project, Dark Wallet, never got the bounty because of this. And I think about this a lot because I believe what's happening today with Michael Saylor and Larry Fink and Donald Trump is going to play out in a very similar fashion. We're going to see how, of course, the number goes up and we're going to be excited, saying, yeah, we made it. We're mainstream. We said this was going to happen. We told you so. But then we also don't get the technology that we want for making payments, for having a degree of privacy, for having better scalability, because there's so much research out there. Every project in and of itself has something interesting and original about it, with the exception of, you know, the tokens on Solana or something that make no sense. But with the exception of
Mm-hmm.
these meme coins, you can find some lessons to learn in pretty much every project, because they all tried different protocols. They tried to combine different elements to come up with some outcomes. And all Bitcoin has to do to make this maximalist concept happen is to just pick the best and the most tested and the one that can help users get better scalability, lower fees, and also better privacy. Because right now, there is really no privacy, there's
Mm-hmm.
just deniability. Each time you receive an address, and this is in the white paper, each time you receive a transaction, you should generate a new address. This is what Satoshi recommended. It's part of the white paper. It's in chapter 10. You can look it up. But it hasn't really improved since then. The primitives are the same. You can see a lot of information about the sender. Basically, you don't just see how much you received from the sender, you also see how much money the sender has. And of course, there's some obfuscation that was created in these coin joins. But these coin joins are just a way to mix existing funds to make it difficult to trace them to the origin. You can also make payments from these coin joins. So when you look back, you're not going to be sure which one was the sender. But this is the farthest it goes. And unfortunately, there's still no way to hide the amount that you're sending. And network level privacy is still poor and optional, as in you can actually associate some nodes with transactions if you know what you're doing. And they did integrate Tor into the client, but how many people are actually using Tor? Not too many,
Mm-hmm.
mostly because it's slow. There was a proposal to fix this. It's called Dandelion Plus Plus. You can find that in Monero. You can find that in Firo, or formerly Zcoin. But for some reason, Bitcoin never used that. And it's not even something that requires a soft fork. It's just something that provides an extra layer of noise to make sure that you cannot associate a transaction with an IP address and the node. It mixes the IP addresses so that you cannot make any direct connections, and there's more deniability. I wish Bitcoin had that one too, but I don't know. Maybe Litecoin can adopt it.
Well, I think as the market evolves, you'll naturally see the original value prop of Bitcoin be demanded. I don't think many people will understand it or really need it right now. There are people in the world that use it for its intended value prop, but it has a long way to go for the market to transition out of the casino, what's best for short-term number go up versus what's actually best for price long-term. And it's interesting you brought up Peter Todd and Amir because they're both like super influential early Bitcoiners, but pretty different viewpoints. I always liked Amir's view. I thought he was right, but he was kind of exiled from the Bitcoin community early on because he was talking about Bitcoin's value prop being black market money, and that's why yeah, his names of the wallet like Dark Wallet or Dark Fi. I think he's on the right track. It's just the short-term number go up made him lose a lot of credibility. It seems like to me, and then
Oh, it
Peter
was more
Todd.
than this, because Amir decided to give up anything related to development. His biggest flaw is that he started a lot of good projects and he never stuck around. He just
Mm,
jumped to something new. And what he did to basically remove himself from the conversation for a few years was to join. He went to fight ISIS in Syria. He joined the
mm-hmm,
army. And the fact that he did this kept him busy. And by the time he came back, a lot has changed. There was the block size war, which he missed, and the landscape was very different. And I don't think he found much value in Bitcoin anymore. He realized, okay, it's still the same network, it hasn't changed much. it just got segued and people are trying to build Lightning, but he wanted to build dark markets and he wanted to build privacy layers and networks. But I think, so I did a 7-hour interview with him. I don't expect people to actually listen to that, but I was surprised to see it has like 2,000 downloads on YouTube and much more on Spotify. But he did mention at one point that he does consider building his DarkFi network as a ZK rollup for Bitcoin, because he envisions that he can tap much more capital and much more liquidity by doing this. Right now, DarkFi is going to be a layer 1, a network
Mm-hmm.
that runs on its own blockchain. But the purpose of it is to tokenize other assets. So if you want to use Bitcoin or Ethereum or Litecoin or whatever with Zcash cryptography, he's going to provide the layer for that. There are other networks that do it in a similar fashion. There's Zano that does this, but with Monero cryptography. There's, what's the other one? Beam that does it with Mimblewimble cryptography. So you have lots of alternatives. Amir is going to try to do something with Zcash cryptography. And it's pretty great. I'm happy that he's doing this. It's just that we are not fixing Bitcoin. So we're, instead of investing in development and improving the cryptography, we're just creating new networks and we're increasing the money supply, right? There's going to be many more coins and tokens that are legitimate and have a use case on the market. And there's nothing wrong with this except for the fact that on the long term, it may pose an existential crisis for Bitcoin if there's a lot of liquidity on other networks. Right now, WBTC, which is wrapped Bitcoin, is a much larger asset with more liquidity than Lightning and Liquid and all of these combined by an order of 10 times or something. It's much bigger. And I don't see much marketing for it. I don't see anyone saying, oh, I'm so happy to be using WBTC to do DeFi and smart contracts on Ethereum. It's happening. People use it, but it's not very loud.
Mm-hmm.
When on the other hand, Lightning, for example, is very loud.
Yeah.
But it's still a minority of the community that's using that.
For sure. Yeah, it's interesting to see the difference between marketing and usage. It's like it's crazy in the space for a lot of things, not just like WBTC versus Lightning Network, but also Litecoin too, right? It's doing like 50% of Bitcoin's transactions, sometimes 60% a day, but you don't hear any talk of it. You have it leading on a lot of these merchant processors or increasing the most versus all the other proof of work chains, but there's like no marketing for it. It's so odd, and I think it just shows the like difference between the speculators and their mindsets and what's actually happening on the part of the market that will drive price long term. I just don't it's hard for me to comprehend why the speculative market is so far away from what's actually happening. Do you ever think about these things, like why there's been so much hype and still talk about Lightning Network like 10 years later, despite the lack of real usage, and then almost zero talk about Litecoin and its growth in monetization, network effects, and adoption? Do you ever think about that, or why do you think that's the case?
Let me combine two of the topics because we were supposed to talk about Peter Todd before
Yeah.
this, and you
Oh
mentioned
yeah,
him.
for sure.
And you also said something about adoption and the fact that there's not much talk about it. When I interviewed Peter last year in July, I asked him about Litecoin and what he thinks about MWeb and whatever. His reply was, there are no users on Litecoin. Nobody is using that for payments. And I said, wait a minute. According to BitPay statistics, it's the most used coin. And it's also very used on other payments processors and merchants. And it's more popular than you assume. It actually has users, even if you don't see them on Twitter or something. And his reply was, please allow me to question the statistics that BitPay is giving. And of course, there is some history here because BitPay was one of the main proponents of SegWit 2x back in the day, back in 2017. They really wanted to increase the block size, and they believed this was the only way for their business, which was that of enabling people to pay with Bitcoin to merchants and merchants receiving US dollar in their accounts. This was, I think, one of the ways that BitPay wanted to thrive in business. Didn't work out for them, but it worked out for them with Ethereum and Litecoin and other coins. So there is, I think, a lot of denial of Litecoin's existence, persistence, and merits. People will say, yeah, it has no users. I don't want to build on Litecoin. I don't want to work on Litecoin. I don't want to think about Litecoin because there's not much happening. And I did see this, because when I made this magazine here, people were asking me, well, are you going to do this every month or twice a year or something? I released this in July and it's still up to date. And it is a bit disappointing when you think about it. I mean, of course, I can include some more statistics about how many payments were made with Litecoin, but the Lite wallet still hasn't added Mimblewimble. And in this magazine from July actually announced that it's coming soon, and it's still not there. But Cake Wallet did. So it's a bit slow, and it's a bit disappointing to see that not even from this development perspective do you find something exciting. Right now, I think the biggest news is the ETF, because the SEC confirmed that the filing was received and might be correct, and there's some speculation about it. But there should be more builders working on this, and for better and for worse, I mean, mostly for worse, it's not really happening. And
For
when
sure.
people build something on Litecoin, like I remember OmniLite, and there was some enthusiasm with people hoping that they're going to bring Tether to Litecoin. That never went anywhere. Ordinals, I'm not sure how popular they still are. It's still like a niche market. It was niche on Bitcoin, but it was much smaller on Litecoin. And then that one didn't last too long. I'm actually an ordinal on Litecoin. If you look it up, there's a picture of my Pepe there and one of my girlfriend's Pepe. So we had some fun with that, but there's no real market for it. And when you
Yeah,
think about it, what is the number of users for MWeb, and how much did the liquidity increase over the last year? It did after the Cake wallet made the integration, but I think there's a lot of untapped potential here, and also a
for
lot
sure.
of untapped marketing potential. I remember Robbie last year wanted to rebrand MWeb as Virtual Private Money, VPM. I think it's a bit confusing. I don't know. Maybe he has a point there and he's dealing with normies, but you're going to tell people, you should use VPM on Litecoin. And then they send you their address and they're going to ask, why is there MWeb in my address? And you have to explain to them that too. Like, I think MWeb is just good enough. It's not like an abbreviation that is hard to pronounce or something. It's web with M
Yeah, for sure.
for it. There's nothing like it really. VPM
Yeah.
sounds like VPN.
Yeah, it does. It might be confusing. I'm not the greatest marketer, so no real opinion on that. But with your
Look,
interview,
John in the chat says that he's about to drop 10 Litecoins on an ordinal, so the market is not
oh,
dead.
yeah, there's these new like Litecoin MFers. I think those have gotten a little popular. I look at the ordinal stuff as like NFTs. I'm not that bullish on them long term. I think it's short-term speculation that may have some collectible value in the long term, but a lot of that stuff comes and goes really fast, just like meme coins on Solana. I think will eventually go away. But I did watch your interview with Peter Todd, and I thought, yeah, a lot of the things he was saying didn't make the most sense to me. You did ask him something about people using Litecoin. I think one of the responses was like, well, they might use it to pay for stuff, but it matters, what they're storing their savings on or what they're holding. Which to me there's this big store value narrative with Bitcoin. But I've always looked at it as if it loses its medium of exchange dominance, or it starts becoming demonetized, it's not supported by network effects and monetization, then eventually it loses its store value qualities too. I think they go hand in hand. And if you even notice it on BitPay, right? Like people started using Litecoin, and my thesis since 2017 was that it would happen as Bitcoin became prohibitively expensive for certain types of transactions, and that's what you see. You see BitPay transactions for Litecoin average order value is like $50, whereas with Bitcoin it's 1,300 or something. And so Litecoin has had an ability, because Bitcoin has priced out certain transactions, to gain all of these users. And yeah, it's relatively boring, but I always looked at Litecoin's greatest strength as being so similar to Bitcoin that if demand for Bitcoin was so high that it priced out transactions, Litecoin would be there. And it's pretty impressive that Litecoin has, once it gains those users from higher Bitcoin fees, they tend to stay. So even though it's been boring and nobody's talking about it, Litecoin users increased more than any other proof of work chain this cycle. Even we were doing like 80,000 transactions a day back in 2023, and now it's hovering around 200,000 when ordinals on Bitcoin pushed up fee levels. So I guess when Peter Todd said that to you about, and I don't know if you remember, but I'm pretty sure he said something about Litecoin will never succeed because nobody wants to hold it. But I noticed the data from BitPay, BitRefill, and then just looking at the public on-chain data, that more and more people are deciding now to take payouts in Litecoin, so save in it rather than taking their payouts in Bitcoin. And that network adoption level is holding even after Bitcoin fees go down, which means once people leave Bitcoin, they're not going back. They're staying around on Litecoin. So I actually see the opposite. It's becoming more of a store of value. But I'm curious as to your perspective on that and what you were thinking when he responded that way with your interview.
I think it's a chicken and egg problem. Like, of course, you want the currency to be spendable, but of course, you want people to save in it. I don't know which one should come first. It's a matter of market dynamics. I do think it's gonna happen for Litecoin. I think the way it's being developed with care and also some thoughtfulness for features that should exist, there's gonna be some demand for it. Also, it has zero conf and no RBF, so it's better suited for commerce. My girlfriend likes Litecoin, by the way. She's a fan.
Awesome.
Yeah.
It seems like it's appealed to females in the past. I don't know why that is, but I've noticed that even in 2017, 2021 a little bit. I wonder why that is. I've seen more, of course there's girls involved in Bitcoin, but at least from my perspective, girls have been more interested in Litecoin. Like there's a higher percentage of females involved in Litecoin than Bitcoin. It's just an interesting dynamic I've witnessed myself.
I guess she just likes something that's fast to spend and the fees are permanently, or not permanently, but almost always low.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
So that plays a major role. The fact that the fees are low and it's easy to send around and the confirmations come fast. In the case of Bitcoin, you have to really be patient when you're sending on the base layer. And you're also a bit paranoid because you think, okay, if I didn't pay the right fee, it's going to get stuck in the mempool. And then I have to RBF or CBFP the transaction, which means child pays for parent.
Mm-hmm.
It's not ideal, you know.
For sure.
It could
Yeah.
have been made better for payments. Satoshi's idea of Bitcoin was to use it for payments. But most of the development that happened since Satoshi left was towards the direction of making it more difficult to spend in commerce.
Mm-hmm.
And this is an ugly truth that if you look at the BIPs, how many of them were actually tailored to make Bitcoin easier to spend?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I gotcha. There's one other thing I wanted to ask you about. We were talking about chicken and egg problem with whether it's a medium of exchange or store of value first. And it's a common thing that I think is misunderstood quite a bit. I see it in comments all the time on some of the articles I've written where people assume like Bitcoin's been this store of values for its entire history and that it was always a better money. So they quote Gresham's law saying like good money drives out bad. You hoard the good money, spend the bad money. But originally, early on in Bitcoin's, after its launch and its early development and monetization, people were attracted to use it for Silk Road because they couldn't use any other form of money to get what they wanted to get from that marketplace. And so it was really like started as a medium exchange, um, and then eventually developed into a store of value, and then they kind of simultaneously feed off of each other. And I see the same thing happen with other forms of money. If you're going to want to compete with these large fiat currencies, the dollar, that have these great store of value qualities, or gold or silver, some of these others that have historically been a store of value, I think at first it has to come on the medium exchange side. It has to do something different, unique, that provides a value proposition. And at first, nobody's going to want to save in it because there's such high risk. But it's really the medium of exchange demand qualities that are unique and different that allow you to do something you can't do with other monies that provide those initial network effects.
Okay, let me read to you a quote from Satoshi Nakamoto. It dates from September 23rd of 2010, posted at 1756 UTC. The topic of the thread is porn. Satoshi Nakamoto says, and I quote, Bitcoin would be convenient for people who don't have a credit card or don't want to use the cards they have, either don't want the spouse to see it on the bill or don't trust giving their number to porn guys or afraid of recurring billing. So Satoshi participated in this speculative talk about what Bitcoin can be used for. And the topic of it was, can Bitcoin be used to buy porn? So you really have to understand that this guy was thinking of ways to make Bitcoin useful in commerce for spending. Of course, these edge cases are some of the first ones that are willing to experiment because they have a reason, people have a reason to use Bitcoin when they buy that stuff. But then you come up with, not people come up with this idea and they say, Bitcoin was always a store of value and it was always designed to be digital gold. And that's just not true. That's not the intention behind it. It's supposed to be used, it's supposed to be spent. Even the UTXO means unspent transaction output. Bitcoin doesn't take into account how many coins you own. It takes into account how many coins you did not spend, which means that everything should be spent eventually.
Agreed. Yeah, I think that's aligns with my way of thinking. It's interesting how it makes sense why the speculative market has encouraged hodl culture because they all want to be rich. But yeah, there's no use value to Bitcoin, right? With dollars, you can burn them. With gold, you can wear it as jewelry or maybe use it in electronics. But with Bitcoin, the only use for it is a money to be spent. And I think that hodl culture will eventually go away. It's gone on a long time, but it's got to end at some point. I don't know how long you have, but there were a few things I didn't get to ask you if you have a little bit of time.
Sure, go ahead.
But okay, so I wanted to ask you about your podcast. When did you start it, or what gave you what incentivized you, encouraged you to pursue the Bitcoin Takeover podcast originally?
In 2018, November and December were very brutal. I remember we went from like $6,000 to $3,000 in less than 1 month. And at the time, I was writing for a publication that was called Crypto Insider. And I've also interviewed Charlie Lee and John Moore, Johnny Litecoin, for Crypto Insider. You can find the interviews on YouTube, actually. And at the time I was not sure if I'm still going to find work in the space because the money seemed to be drying out. We were all writing articles, doing our job, acting like we have an editorial board and we have a schedule and we have everything, but nobody had any idea if we're gonna get paid for it or if we're gonna get fired tomorrow or something, if we're still gonna have jobs. So around December, I started thinking of ways to start my own thing, December of 2018. And in January of 2019, also I think what really happened at the time, so I can blame it on my financial situation or whatever, but what really happened was that my grandma was dying and she has played a major role in raising me. And I had this existential phase at that point where I was, on one hand, trying to keep myself distracted from what was happening in my life. And I also wanted to make her proud in a way, to be completely independent, to have a project of my own, something that is going to possibly become my main gig.
Mm-hmm.
And I started Bitcoin Takeover podcast. I started recording for it in January of 2018, and I published the first 11 episodes. Initially, I had this concept of Netflix seasons where I deploy 10 episodes all at once, and I give the people the option to listen to the ones that they like the most or watch the whole series, binge watch, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't such a great idea. I also had the idea to also have bonus tracks like the albums from cassettes or CDs where you had a track listing, but at the end of it, you also found that there's something else that is not listed there. So I also added a bonus episode to the first season. I realized that people just listen to the big names and they skip the other ones. And it's just the way it works, you know. I guess I was naive to believe that they're going to really listen to all the episodes, but I kept the structure of having seasons and episodes. Right now I'm at season 16, and I found it very convenient because I got to, initially I was doing seasons of 10 to 20 episodes maybe, and then I was changing the graphics and I was moving on to a different concept. I experimented a bit. For example, in seasons 4 and 8, all the interviews were about security and hardware wallets or cold storage, trying to get everyone to talk about their products and try to compare them.
Mm-hmm.
And after a while, I discovered last year that I started season 15 during Bitcoin's 15th year of existence. I said, you know, this is very convenient. I should keep going for the rest of the year and then start season 16, which I did in January of this year. I'm just gonna keep going. At this point, you know, the secret to being somewhat successful in this nerd world with podcasting is to just keep going and maybe go to
Mm-hmm.
some events and meet people so they remember you. They know that you're for real and you're involved and you care about this. And just keep going, even if it's difficult, even if you don't see much growth. After a while, you're going to discover that it doesn't really matter how many people are downloading and watching and listening. It matters who's watching. And
For sure.
you're going to understand that always the quality of your listeners is more important than the quantity. And something that you also need to learn is that you're basically educating your audience, not just with information that you provide, but also in the way that you act. So there's always this live by the sword, die by the sword principle. If you're gonna be toxic and also make fun of other people and have this sort of attitude where you're dismissing others, whenever you're gonna be in times of trouble, they're gonna slay you. And they're gonna have the
Mm-hmm.
same dismissive attitude towards you. And they're gonna hold you by the standards that you're establishing yourself. But if you're just chill and you're honest with yourself and with the others and you're honest about your biases and you just keep going, I think you're going to attract the same kind of people who have a similar mentality. And I'm very
Yeah.
proud of my audience. I think that they're some of the, you know, they're the kind of people I want to hang out with. And
For
it's
sure.
the best statement you can make about an audience for anything. Because of course there's always this temptation to be more clickbaity, to get more views, to be more successful, get more money from sponsors or whatever. But you're gonna realize that it's only temporary. And if you're
Hmm.
following the trends, you're only as good as the next guy who's gonna come along and do the same, or even invent a new trend, and you're gonna fall behind. And you're not really establishing any sort of loyalty to your brand. You're only riding a wave, and then when the
Hmm.
wave is over, you have to figure out where you need to go next.
Yeah,
So
I'm
just
noticing
keep
that a
going.
lot.
Don't overthink it.
Okay, gotcha. That's good advice. I just started doing these live streams like 2 months ago, but it's okay. And that's what I've said to myself, and I've always kind of lived that way too. Is I have my specific viewpoints. I'm not trying to attract or do clickbaity things. I know Litecoin's relatively unpopular in the speculative casino market, but um, I have this view around it, and there's a community here that also shares the same sort of long-term values. And I think, yeah, not trying to give in to what's popular is important for your long-term success too. You might have short-term crazy numbers and audience and maybe make more money, but you'll probably lose your credibility if you're always trying to chase the next um, whatever hot topic that's coming up. Um, so I would
I think
agree
the
with you.
Peter McCormack approach was smart in hindsight. Basically, he made a list of the top 100 people in Bitcoin, and he chased them and tried to interview them and tried
Hmm.
to persistently get people on his podcast to make announcements. And he was trying basically to be the first one to present stuff. But the problem with that is, first of all, that you're not going to have any kind of identity for yourself, and it might get boring if you're not chasing what really interests you, and you're not using your show for your own rather selfish interests of learning something new. You're not gonna survive for too long, mostly because you get bored.
For
You
sure.
gotta keep yourself interested in what you're doing.
That is true. And I think a lot of people that built their identities around one coin to rule them all, if that ends up not playing out, I mean, you kind of lost you you will lose a lot of followers, right? If you
Oh,
passed
don't
upon
be so naive. There's no accountability in this space. People make calls all the time and they say, "Oh, I was wrong." They don't even say they were wrong. They just move on. Look
that's
at
true.
FTX, look at BlockFi. So many people shilled BlockFi and Celsius, and
Yeah,
nobody came for them. I mean,
I know.
a couple of influencers, they went under the bus, but they landed on their feet. Like BitBoy is more popular than ever, even though
That's true.
he promoted Celsius, and he never really suffered from it. He never had to deal with the consequences of his actions. So
Yeah,
don't believe that there's a lot of accountability, because people move on, they forget. And there's also this sense of, I guess, personal responsibility, because of course you can blame some influencer and say, "Oh, I bought into this because this big guy told me and he has 100,000 views on YouTube." But really, it's your fault. It's not like
mhm.
that guy signed the transactions and made you do it under duress or something.
Yeah,
You're
that's
the
very
one who
true.
did it. You're the one who got the information and then was supposed to actually think for himself. And you
For
didn't.
sure.
You can't, there's only so much you can blame on others.
Yeah, that is true. I mean, I wrote articles. There's nobody listening to me, but on BlockFi and that I have cred lending platform before it blew up, warning about these things. But nobody, yeah, it's funny. Like a lot of the influencers that took the money from those firms for, you know, they probably got paid sponsorships. You're right. They didn't really lose their audience. They actually grew audience since then. So it is interesting. I don't know why, but maybe it's just, there's a lot of newcomers. They already have these network effects and the YouTube algorithm just promotes them or something. But Yeah, it seems like the space isn't rewarding critical thinking and like things that will lead to long-term success. But
But
eventually, I
why
think
would
eventually
it?
it
People
will.
want to
Yeah.
get rich. That's what most people want. They're here, and as long as you're pumping their bags one way or the other, they're gonna be happy. And this
Yeah,
is,
that's true.
I feel sometimes like I'm echoing what Chris DeRose was saying. When I was starting out, Chris DeRose was on his way out. I was able to interview him a few times since then. The last time was last year. But I realized that this guy was so ahead of his time. And he realized some stuff that maybe it took years for others, including myself, to discover. And he did understand that the only morality in Bitcoin, and this is what I think the term comes from him. He was the first one to popularize it. Number go up. And this is basically what is gonna delineate what is right from what is wrong. Does it make the number go up? If yes, then it's right. If it
Hmm.
doesn't, then it's wrong.
Yeah, that's very true. Well,
And
what?
it's messed up because now we have ETFs and it goes so much against the purpose of these projects. But nobody's
y-
really voicing their criticism because their bags are getting pumped.
Yeah, true. And then yeah, the the thing I think though eventually has to happen is the casino phase. I think has to end at some point, and then we'll see. Maybe those people don't get backlash, but I hope that some of the people that have had the foresight to see things play out and were correct get some credibility. That'd be nice. And a return to focusing on fundamentals, even though fundamentals are so made fun of in this space and kind of traders dominate, technical analysts dominate. Um, I hope that I know it can't. I know this speculative thing can't go on forever. So
I mean, there's
it'll be
nothing
nice.
wrong with speculation. You have to understand that these traders are like the blood that is flowing through this body. And without liquidity to keep these networks alive, there is really very little use. You're not gonna see too much activity without these traders. So you gotta give them credit for what they're doing. They play a role. It's not the most honorable or the most respected, but it's
True.
it's a part that's important for keeping these networks alive and giving them use cases, even though most of the trading happens on exchanges. But when you look at the price, where does the price come from? It comes from
Hmm.
various exchanges according to the amount of transactions and liquidity that they process. And
That
it's a
is very true.
percentage of the liquidity that's being transacted, aggregated to actually give you something which
Hmm.
resembles a price. Because otherwise, you can just make up a price according to how much it costs to mine one Litecoin or how difficult it was for you to acquire that Litecoin or whatever.
For sure. Yeah, and I think speculators play an important role too. I just think at some point speculation has to align with the most likely future uh, reality because everyone's trying to predict the future. Um, yeah, that's what speculators are doing. But sometimes the focus becomes so short term, like with meme coins in the next few days, that it's a distraction. But whatever, it is what it is. The market will do what it's going to do. Can't change it. I wanted to ask you, since you've been doing this so long, do you have a specific favorite guest that's been on your podcast over your 16 seasons? Like one that stands out to you?
Oh, that's such a hard question. Like, imagine doing
Yeah.
200, almost 300 interviews, and then you ask me, do you have a favorite? I
Or do you have a
think
group of?
some of the most memorable ones are the first ones because you're most nervous. They mean the most to you. You get more excited when you see, okay, after this interview, there are more people who want to come on the show. And I feel like I'm actually making an impact and I'm
Hmm.
contributing to the conversation and whatever is being said on my show matters. I remember being so nervous the first time I interviewed Peter Todd in 2020. Yeah, it was just before the pandemic. He was, I guess, living in Canada, and I had to wake up very early. I think I woke up at 5 in the morning for that interview. It was memorable because I think it was also one of the times when I felt stupid. So whatever I was asking him, I felt like I'm not really using the full depth of his knowledge. And maybe I made him feel bored. I don't know. But after
Mhm.
that interview, he agreed to join a few more times. So I guess it wasn't all that bad. It's not my favorite. It's just that there are all of these moments that come to you. I
Mhm.
remember my first interview and where I was sitting in my room and how I did my setup and everything else. I remember all the different setups that I had because over the years I've changed the microphones, I've changed the audio interfaces, I've changed, for this audio interface, I think I've recorded more than 200 episodes with it. But it has these plugins that you can use for equalization, compression, and all of these audio stuff. I think I've changed that many times over the years. Even last month, I think I made a major change because I removed one of the compressors that I thought was too loud and I replaced it with something else that I think suits my needs much better. So that
I
there are these moments that you remember. Of course, the ideas are important, and that's what
Mhm.
podcasts are all about. But it's very hard for me to pick favorites
Yeah, for
because
sure, that makes
they're
sense.
all equally exciting, even nowadays. For example, tomorrow night, which I guess in the US is gonna be midday, I'm gonna interview Super Testnet, and he has this idea that the Lightning Network is more private than Monero, and he's gonna try to defend this thesis. Of course, it's not true because when you send someone an invoice, they're gonna be able to see a lot about this invoice because the invoice for Lightning contains a lot of information about the type of wallet that you're using, your node, and all this stuff. Lightning only has good privacy for the sender, which is quite the opposite of Bitcoin because Bitcoin has no privacy for the sender. So
Mhm.
Lightning has this, but it's a bit outrageous to make this call because Monero is optimized for private transactions. That's the only purpose that it has, and people optimize around that. It's gonna be interesting, but I get excited about this stuff, and this is
Mhm.
what keeps me going. Just excitement, seeing new ideas, seeing people have wacky theories. I get them on, we talk. I learn something new. I hope they learn something new from myself too. And then I just keep going. And
Yeah, for sure. Well, that we can I can
that's
tell.
my best advice, just keep
Okay,
going.
gotcha. I can tell though that you really are passionate about this stuff. I have listened to a lot of your podcasts, and I like them because they're unique and different. And I think focusing on things that interest me that I think are important for like long-term development of this space, helping it fulfill its original value proposition. So I
I
find much
appreciate it.
more,
Thank you.
yeah, much more alpha, I guess, or signal and helpful and for educational information that's actually helpful, more so than a lot of the popular guys that mainly talk about government stuff and price. Um,
Yeah,
there,
but that's boring.
yeah, it is boring.
At least
It's
for
super boring.
myself, it gets boring and predictable, and they're just spinning the same narrative around. And it makes me wonder because I used to enjoy listening to stuff like Tales from the Crypt when they were talking
Hmm.
about technical stuff and they had developers. They still do that sometimes, but nowadays it feels more like Alex Jones, but with Bitcoin.
Yeah.
It's more, it plays along this American conservative angle. And it's not that I disagree too much, even though I disagree when I listen. I'm like, what the hell is this? It's just that it becomes a partisan issue when I believe that Bitcoin should not have any political leaning or color, something
Hmm.
like this. Of course, it's orange, but my point is that you should not politicize a technology that can be used by everyone and possibly generate some hatred for or from the other side that maybe does not find itself in agreement at this point because they don't see the value in it. But there's a lot of value for everyone. And this is just my approach. I focus on it from a technological perspective, not from a monetary one, not from necessarily an economic one. I don't think I have any sort of economic biases. I'm also open to systems that maybe are more inflationary for
Mm-hmm.
various reasons. I think at this point, the fact that we're going to have a multi chain world is inevitable. And if this strategic reserve is going to happen in the US, that's the end of significant Bitcoin development. From that point on, it's just maintaining the protocol, but not adding anything interesting to it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
But
I would
I'm
agree.
bullish on the cypherpunk future because
Me
there's
too.
so much happening around us, and there are so many interesting academic papers. There's one from the Starkware people, Collider script. I think that's very interesting because they realized how to do these cryptographic constructions for Starks on Bitcoin without a Covenant soft fork, but it's very expensive. There's also something which is called shielded client-side validation, and I did an interview with the guys that created this. It's sort of like a protocol like Counterparty on Bitcoin, except that all transactions have the same size, and also they have zero knowledge cryptography for privacy. Really cool stuff. I mean, there's so many good ideas that are being proposed, and unfortunately, even MWeb was one of them in 2016, and it took like almost 6, 7 years for it to get built, to be put into production code and actually deployed on a live network with incentives. And it's cool that it happened, you know. It's cool that David took the time. I think he's very underrated. He doesn't get too much credit. And I was happy to interview him, even though on the internet he's very hard to get. You have to really go to one of the conferences that he attends and get him in person if you want to interview him, because he's more open.
Uh-huh. Yeah, well, there's a lot of technologies that are like under the radar that aren't getting a lot of attention, but they will, in my mind, once the incentives like worldwide change a bit. Unfortunately, I think Bitcoin's best for tough times, and if we do have this AI state being developed and larger governments just continuing to grow and expand their power and control over the financial system, that inevitably there will be some resistance. There's a breaking point in individuals, and then hopefully we can see the market fund these resistance tools, and privacy will become a lot more important to people. That's just my prediction. Last question, I guess, since we're talking about the future, I always imagine in my head that from a long time ago, that we'd live in this multi-chain future where you could swap between chains, arbitrage security for cost. If you don't uh, want to pay for a super high level of security and you don't need it, then you could settle on a different chain, and maybe you don't even know it's in a mobile wallet that has this slider where you can select the security level and it automatically settles on X, Y, or Z chain. But in my head, I imagine us running nodes on like a mobile phone as bandwidth processing and storage keeps increasing exponentially. But I'm not too familiar with a lot of the privacy stuff and how that scales. Like Tor, for example, you were talking earlier about how the issue has been it's too slow. How do you imagine this like convergence of this continuous exponential increase in like dollar cost performance for hardware, bandwidth, and storage, um, eventually leading to this freedom enabling technology that we've all been hoping for so long, but haven't seen it manifest? Like, what's your outlook over the next like 5, 10 years, and how we'll actually use these cryptocurrencies? Do you think that future will be enabled, or do you think it's really far off?
I think so. Zero knowledge cryptography is very, at this point, it's popular, but it's also untapped in terms of applications. There's so much that you can do with it. I believe that ZK is what saved Ethereum because it seemed like this unscalable clusterfuck with a lot of bloat and very inefficient in the way that it operates. It got destroyed in 2017 by CryptoKitties. You have to remember that.
Yeah, I
But
do.
with zero knowledge technology, you can actually make that vision happen with rollups, with basically compressing data into just proofs as opposed to storing a lot of information. Right now, if you want to get a glimpse of the future and what might happen in a few years, I think you can look at the Zashi wallet for Zcash, which basically is very efficient at synchronizing this light client. And then you can receive funds maybe from an exchange where you can buy Zcash, but it's still transparent. And then you just have a button that says shield and consolidate funds. And it just works so well, you know? It's exactly what I would want from a privacy wallet on the mobile phone. And you can also send encrypted messages in your transactions, which I think is also cool. For example, if you want to purchase my magazine, for example, about Litecoin
Mhm.
or the one about privacy, I have another one that I made more recently. And you want to send me a private transaction and you also want to send the address with the transaction, you can do that. You can put that in the description of the transaction and it's encrypted. Only I can read that, or you can read that from your wallet. It's really nice. I think they did a pretty good job. Zero knowledge proofs are the future in terms of making large chunks of data transferable and easy to sync on low power devices. But also, hardware is getting faster and more powerful every year. So it's
Mhm.
going to be interesting to see where this convergence leads. What's disappointing is that the conversation in Bitcoin is still stuck somewhere in 2017, and I don't
Yeah.
see it. I told you, if we're going to
Yeah.
get a strategic reserve from the US, that's an early ossification. If Ethereum also gets that, it might also stall development, even though they have a different culture and they can find, I guess, more ways to play around. In the case of
Mhm.
Bitcoin, people are already conservative. If you're going to have the largest government buying into the project, I think that's game over for privacy or scaling to make it work as money. And we're going to have to focus on other chains. Maybe that will be Litecoin's moment to shine. I hope you guys also do exciting stuff like Drivechains just to bring builders. Because I sense in my podcast recordings, I sense a large degree of frustration with Bitcoin development because you have all of these talented guys who are waiting for their chance to build the stuff that they want. They raise funding for it, they ship the code, they keep it on testnet for a few years because it's considered to be too experimental, and then it goes nowhere because there's no
Mhm.
consensus. And this consensus concept is sort of a chimera, I think. Is that what you call it? A chimera? Chimera? It's an illusion because
Mm.
you're always going to find someone who says no, it's a bad idea. And of course you're going to have someone who says no, it's a bad idea because there are a bunch of spooks out there who don't want the project to evolve at all. So if you're relying on this concept that everyone should agree before you do something, then you're never going to get anywhere. And there's going to be even fake opposition, even AI opposition, but they're not
Mhm.
that stupid. They're just going to pay a couple of agents and make sure that nothing ever happens. And it's really unfortunate to sit there and wait for permission to build. And unfortunately, in Bitcoin, you also have this culture where you get stigmatized once you work on other protocols and other projects. You're always going to be a shitcoiner for some reason, even though some people get a free pass. I think it's very relative. If Peter Todd, he actually did some auditing for MWeb. If he does that, nobody's going to
Yeah.
hold him accountable for it. But if one of these young developers, and that sounds stupid because Peter is like 40, but if one of the new developers does this, he's gonna get crucified and called a shitcoiner, and possibly part of his funding is gonna get cut off. I think there's a bit of danger in these scholarship programs or whatever they do at Circle and Spiral and whatever. No, I don't think it's Circle. It's just Spiral from Jack Dorsey, where they condition with OpenSats and other organizations that you're gonna stay Bitcoin only. And once you decide to do something else, or if you do decide to do something else out of frustration because it's not going where you want it to go, you're gonna get excommunicated from the
Yeah.
community. It happened to a video game developer. His name is Carlos Roldan. I interviewed him back in 2019 when I started my podcast. He was working on a video game that's called Light Night. And the concept was that it was going to be a Fortnite clone that allows people to earn money when they frag other people online. So if you're very good at the game, you're going to actually make some money. You're going to put some coins when you enter the game, and then if you're good, you take other people's coins. If you're bad, you lose. It sounds a bit like gambling. I think that's why, from a regulation point of view, it never went too far. But at one point, he got frustrated, even though I do have my own criticism of his way of handling business, because he was selling in game assets as NFTs on Liquid before the game was even launched. And when he did launch the game, it sucked. I mean, it wasn't even fun. People play games because they want it to be fun, not because they want to make money. So it wasn't even fun. It was clunky and it felt nothing like the original it was trying to clone. But at one point, he found funding in Solana and he decided, okay, I want to do this. And I remember the response to that was rather violent on Twitter. Because
Yeah.
what? He decided that basically the expectation for his game was that he was going to bring gamers into Bitcoin. So to find this convergence where people who play video games are going to say, I can make some money, so why don't I play this one instead of that one? The reality was that a bunch of Bitcoiners were the beta testers and it wasn't even fun. And these guys were not real video gamers. They were just guys who wanted to try the game but not commit to playing it every day. So in the end, they had this middle ground situation where they didn't bring any new users to the Lightning Network. They also didn't get Bitcoiners to play it, so there were almost no users, no players. So he looked into Solana because maybe he saw that the culture is different and maybe he's gonna get some video gamers. I'm not sure how far the game went these days, but it's just one example of someone who built something on Bitcoin and it didn't get the traction that people expected. And then he went to another chain and now he's sort of, I don't even know what to call him. He's the worst of shitcoiners or something. And
Oh, I
nobody
see.
should ever talk with him. And he's canceled. And I know what it feels like because I got canceled last year also.
Well, yeah, it seems like that's like so bad for the long term. How it's very like cult like behavior. I mean, people can do whatever they want if they want to build on one chain or another, especially if it's not gaining traction on Bitcoin and there's all this hype around Solana. I don't see why it'd be an issue. But yeah, it's kind of sad to see. It's like self-defeating and suicidal, from my perspective or vantage point, for that community to exile people, and be like verbally aggressive to them online. It shows that it's all about protecting the bags of your own personal holdings, which is sad. But oh well, it is what it is. It's not going to change until the market forces it to change, until Bitcoin price maybe struggles against other altcoins that get adopted, right? Maybe Bitcoin dominance goes down in the next bear market. I think that's possible, just because you have such a huge speculative premium in Bitcoin now versus any other time in history. It's the highest traded price above its underlying monetization levels than ever. And just like we saw with ETH this bull cycle, it's underperformed a lot of people's expectations. I think it's possible that happens with Bitcoin, and then maybe when it's struggling, people will be more open to ideas. I think it's because price has been dominating. Bitcoin dominance is actually doing really well. That's the reason why people are so scared to innovate. But if you see other altcoins gain network effects and start outperforming Bitcoin, then you'll have that natural market incentive to do something. So we'll see. I think that'll happen. Any last question? Anything upcoming? I know you mentioned your interview tomorrow night, but any events that you're going to or excited about? Upcoming things you're working on that you wanted to potentially share with us?
I really don't know what to say about this. I might go to some conferences this year. I'm still not sure which ones. I'm not sure if I'm coming to Las Vegas, where there's going to be the Litecoin Summit and also the large Bitcoin conference. Last year in Nashville, it was fun, but at the same time, it felt, I don't know, the Litecoin event was fine. But then when I went
Mm-hmm.
to the Bitcoin event and I saw a bunch of politicians speaking on stage, I felt out of place. Like, what am I
Mm-hmm.
even doing here? It's not my scene. It's not why I got into this space or why I got interested in this technology. I did not expect politicians to kiss my ass on stage
Mm-hmm.
and praise this technology and say that it's the best thing since bread came sliced. So I don't know if I will be in Las Vegas, even if it sounds fun. It just feels a bit too much if there's gonna be another one of these events. And since Trump won, I expect it to be sort of like a Trump rally. And I don't know. Maybe it can be a fun experience for myself as a European. I have no preference really
Have you been to
for
Las Vegas before?
no.
Oh, this would be the first conference I've ever gone to. I think I'm probably gonna go to the Litecoin conference, but I agree. I don't like seeing especially when price is up and everyone's going crazy. You attract this huge audience that the talks tend to be focused on things that are really not that interesting to me either. But I'm gonna go regardless. I think in May, so it'd be cool to see you there. If you do decide, maybe just to visit to Las Vegas would be fun, and a cool American experience to have. Because Nashville is the one you went to before, right? That Litecoin and Bitcoin conference was in Nashville, correct?
Yes.
And I that when I think of America, I mean Nashville's a cool city, but Las Vegas is one of the bigger, I feel like, real American type experiences that you can have as a foreigner. So it'd be fun if anything, just for that. So
Yeah,
maybe.
maybe. I gotta think about it. This year, I'm gonna try to go to places I haven't visited before. So if I get
Hmm.
invited to exotic countries, I think I'm gonna pick that over the same European conferences that I've been attending for many years. I think I'm
Hmm.
gonna go to the film fest in Warsaw in Poland. That one is gonna have its third edition this year. And I might even do my own conference this year. I'm still thinking about it. Something that's gonna be oriented towards privacy. So I'm gonna invite all the privacy projects, including Litecoin and Monero and Zcash and everything else. I just realized that in this privacy scene or on this privacy scene, you have a lot of segregation and you have events that are attended by the Monero people and their friends, and you have events that are attended by the Zcash people and their friends. And there's nothing really like an umbrella that allows everyone to get under. And I
Hmm.
would love to have this sort of conference this year to organize it and see how big it can get if privacy is a big topic. I received some nice reactions to my, I guess, survey on Twitter. I wanted to see if there's demand for that. And I do like these privacy people because they don't care about price at all. For them, it's just about being able to fulfill the purpose of this coin,
Hmm.
which is to send money from point A to point B without revealing information about the sender or the receiver or the amount or the network IPs or whatever. So that can be interesting. I want to do it in Romania, which is where I am right now. And I might do it around Halloween and make something out of that because apparently, for us Romanians, it's very strange because we have some traditions, but Halloween is not one of them. And to realize that foreigners actually perceive us as the Halloween country because it's the country of Dracula.
Dracula,
Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And maybe they also have this stereotype that we are these villagers who raise goats and they get terrified and terrorized by the presence of a vampire at night or something. I mean, you saw that in movies, and for better and for
Mhm.
worse, that was the only portrayal of my country that became popular.
That's funny. I didn't know you guys didn't celebrate Halloween, but that would be cool. I would go to something like that. A privacy conference. I think privacy is going to become one of the most important things over the next 5, 10 years. So I don't know enough, and I'd like to learn about experts in the privacy field and hear what they're working on. So I think that's a really good idea. There's not a conference, I don't think, at least that exists that's like that, at least crypto
Someone in
currency
the chat
focused.
says this guy makes me want to sell my last Litecoin.
That's so mean. What?
Please,
Who's? I
please,
haven't.
please read the Litecoin magazine. I'm
Yeah,
serious.
Vlad's
It's free and
contributed
open source.
so much to the
There's
Litecoin
also a
space, more than
chicken on the back.
and his magazine that he made for the conference is actually really well written, educational, and it's graphically like appealing. It's super cool. So check it out. Sorry for that comment. I
No, why
don't
would you
know.
apologize? I enjoy this.
Okay. I'm gonna share my screen real quick. If okay, you guys can see this. BTC or Bitcoin takeover.com or btctkvr.com is Vlad's website, where you can find that Litecoin magazine. If you type this website /Litecoin, it pops up. Super cool. Vlad's has his Bitcoin Takeover podcast that he's been doing for 17 seasons, like 200 plus episodes. That's
16.
just 216 episodes.
No, 16 seasons.
Oh, 16 seasons.
And I did like
Um,
300 episodes, I think.
so Bitcoin Takeover at YouTube, subscribe to that. He's one of the few that's not been super distracted by the price stuff and only focused on hype trends. There's like this whole crypto community is so distracted that they fall victim to all the noise. But Vlad has a lot of really high quality guests, like early Bitcoiners, early Bitcoin developers, where you can actually learn something from. So I watch it all the time, and I would encourage everyone to do the same because it provides various perspectives, has a lot of interesting debates, and one of the few places where you can get like real educational content in today's weird world. But thanks for coming on, Vlad. Is there
Thank you
anything
for
else you
having
wanted?
me.
Yeah, is there
Yeah, there's
anything else you wanted to say?
NVK in the chat. He says, what is Vlad's LTC estimate this bull run? $1,000. That's it. 10x from here.
Hell yes. Are there any other questions? I haven't been paying attention to the chat. Vlad is cool. Yes, sir. I don't see any others.
If you want to get Pepe avatar, message my
Oh
girlfriend.
yeah.
She's very talented. She did my profile picture. She did my graphics for this season of the podcast. You can actually see behind me that there's a painting that she did. It's an actual painting that she was able to do for my graphics. She's very talented. I love her very much. And yeah, this is the painting right here.
That's
And I'm
awesome.
using this as the foundation for the thumbnails on YouTube. Basically, I'm replacing the head of this guy with the guest, and I'm putting some information on the side. But yeah, she's very talented. She also did the graphics for this privacy magazine right here, with this Pepe on the cover watching Michael Saylor while taking a leak. And he
That's
says, "It
cool.
feels bad, man." You can see this actually, it's on the same website where you find the Litecoin magazine. If you type /privacy mag instead of Litecoin, you're going to find this and download this for free. On the back cover, you see the same Pepe looking up, and this is the perspective of Michael Saylor looking down on him. And the detail that you should notice is that there's no door, there's no escape. He believes that he's gonna get rich and stuff, but he's stuck. This is Hotel California.
Oh, hell yes. That's awesome. I'll share it on my screen. This is the privacy magazine. What's
There's also an
Annie's?
article about Litecoin MWeb in there, so you can check that out.
Awesome. What's Annie's Twitter handle? Is that her name?
A
Sorry, I
on
thought.
ANNIE_1371.
So can people still reach out to her for custom Pepes like through Twitter or through X?
Yeah, she's very talented.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you want a customized PFP of a Pepe of yourself,
And make that an ordinal on Litecoin.
yeah, do that. Inscribe it on the Litecoin blockchain. But cool. I think that's everything. Again, thanks. I know it's late for you, but I appreciate you coming on and spending so much
MK
time.
wants to know if I ever played Gothic. I'm more of a JRPG guy, so I'm more into Final Fantasy. But I did play Gothic when I was very young, like 12. The first one. I got it from a video game magazine in full. But German RPGs, I'm not really into them. I prefer Japanese ones. They have better stories.
What's your favorite game, Vlad? He also asked that. Do you have one?
Oh, that's hard. I mean, favorite of all time, I think Super Mario Brothers, because that's the one that made me a gamer. The one that made me a gamer once again was Final Fantasy X. I think I played that at a point where I was thinking I'm too old for video games and I don't enjoy them anymore. And that one actually brought me back. I was like, it's like reading a book or watching a movie, but it's more interactive.
For sure.
But
Yeah, I used to
I
play
also
Final Fantasy
enjoy
with
playing side scrollers and platformers, stuff that requires quick reflexes. I also like that. But also RPGs. I'm not much into shooters or I used to be into strategy games, but now I just find them too slow. I get bored.
I see. Did you ever play like League of Legends? That was at one point the most popular game in the world.
No, I played
Or
Dota when it was still a
oh, okay.
mod for Warcraft 3. So you had to open Warcraft 3, go to single player custom map and find the Dota map and play that one. I used to play that, but you know, I didn't get too much into it. I was also into Counter-Strike at the time, which was also a mod for Half-Life. If people remember that, going into Half-Life and going to change game and opening Counter-Strike 1.4 or something. That's the one I was playing. And I played up
I
to
see.
Source, which was basically Counter-Strike with the same graphics engine from Half-Life 2. But I never got into the new one, which is Global Offensive. I think I moved on after maybe I turned 15 or something.
I see. Yeah, Counter-Strike got so popular. Not even that long ago. It's interesting. Like, yeah, gaming in general becoming a competitive sport was kind of cool to see. I was super competitive in gaming as a kid. Um, climbed the ladders of various games. But it was fun. I moved on past that though. I think there comes a point in your life where you realize those skills aren't going to help you at all.
Oh,
Uh,
RPGs are very good for helping you plan your life. Like the way that you manage resources, once you realize, okay, I can actually use these skills in real life. And if I basically look at people who collaborate with me as my team members from this RPG and I look at the pros and cons and their strengths and I basically use their advantages to maximize the outcome of this project. I mean, I can think of ways in which RPGs have made me a much better project manager.
I would agree with you, and I think there's certain like if you're good at video games and you can compete and climb to the top of the ladder, you're probably overall generally pretty intelligent, and it will help you in solving other types of problems or competing in other areas of life. Um, but yeah, they're beneficial. It's just there's some point where it becomes addictive and can be counterproductive if that's the only thing you know. I guess there's a fine line sort of there.
I gotta give a shout out to 84 million, Kyle. He retweeted this and I guess got more people listening. And also to Litecoin Underground. I think there are 3 podcasts right now. There's yours, there's Litecoin Underground, and there's 84 million.
Mm-hmm.
I like them all. I guess at this point I can check them all on my list.
Awesome. Yeah, those guys are great. 84 million. Kyle has a great podcast. He's very structured, professional, and he has a great shop. So if you guys are interested in Litecoin gear, I know I've mentioned it before. He's the place to go. And then Grant, he kind of stopped doing it, so he transitioned, but maybe he'll come back. We'll see.
Don't say transitioned. You know, this means something else. Just like you said, the girlfriend experience at the beginning of this episode.
I think it's well, yeah, man. I'm screwing up all the words, but he changed his content, and he's not Litecoin Underground anymore. But maybe we can convince him to come back. We'll see. We'll see.
There
Hopefully,
was also
Litecoin.
that guy, Crypto Recruiter or something. He
Yeah,
was
back in
doing
2017.
exactly. He was doing price analysis for Litecoin, and then he got into Cardano or something.
Mm-hmm.
I thought
Well,
that
there's
was
just
a
not an
shame.
audience. Yeah, he got huge too. I think it's cool to see. But I think Litecoin, people talking about it, should do well. I think it's going to outperform here, so we should have newcomers, and hopefully we can tell them not just about price and about the actual value prop. That's my goal here. So we'll see. Thanks, Vlad, for spending all the time. Anything else? Final comments or things you want to
Yes,
leave us?
there is Master in the chat who says you should have 84 million as a guest next, and I agree. You should get Kyle on your show. He's very cool.
Yeah, actually I had him like 2 months ago. Or maybe he means you have 84 million on your show, Vlad. Maybe that's what he's meaning. I don't know if Master knows that Kyle was on here like a month or two ago. Regardless, yeah, he's a cool guy.
He
You
should
should have
bring
him on
back the
yours.
Litecoin magazines, by the way. He sold a batch of like 50, and it was like a limited run print. He should bring them back. I feel like the community is larger now. It's a bull market. He's gonna sell them.
Yeah, for sure. Would agree 100%. There's an opportunity here because there's not many accounts talking about this or influencers. There's like none. So if it becomes relatively more popular and you're the go-to place, can sell gear and magazines. Well,
I don't charge anything for that. It's open source. I'm happy when
oh yeah,
people can make money
true,
and
true,
promote some good ideas.
true. Well, Vlad's a true crypto purist and open source content, so take advantage of it. Um, Thanks again, Vlad. Maybe another time down the road can come back. Maybe if Litecoin price is actually at $1,000.
Okay,
I'll have
sounds
a
good.
bigger audience for you. But thanks, I appreciate it. This is just starting for me, and it's helpful to have guests that have been around so long and are relatively popular come on and help me out. So I appreciate it.
Thanks for the invite. Oh,
Yeah, for
I
sure.
can get you Paul Stores if you want.
Can you get me what? Paul Stork? Oh, I had him on too, actually. He did come on like 3 months ago. He was super cool. It's like a 4 hour talk.
Yeah,
He
he's like
talked
that.
over my head a little bit, but it went well. He was great. We just need to push for Drivechains on Litecoin. I need help doing that. I even talked to Charlie about it when Charlie came on here. But that's been the hard thing. I don't know what's stopping it from. We need it to get in front of Charlie's face and maybe David's as well.
No, it's not Charlie or David. It's the miners. You should convince them that there's some value there.
Okay. So the miners. I know there's a huge Litecoin miner. It's on Twitter. But I don't really know the hash rate distribution for Litecoin. It's like 50% is like unknown. Maybe it's smaller scale and decentralized. I don't know. But maybe we can work on that. Paul, you, and a few others can, if you know large miners or have connections. I'm sure Charlie does. Charlie knows these things with hash rate distribution and
Yeah, but you should not rely on him because that's what makes the project centralized
true. Okay. Well,
around the
Vlad,
foundation.
what do we do? What's the last piece of advice? What do we do as a community to get it pushed forward? Like which mining contacts, or how would you go about that?
Well, I think it was Lightspace, or what do you call it? Litecoin mempool explorer.
Mm-hmm.
I'm looking at it right now. Just a second. It's litecoinspace.org. And you go there and you have a section for hash rate and mining pools. And it seems like Via BTC has 28% of the hash rate, F2 pool has 25%, and pool has 19. If you get these free mining pools, you have more than 51%. But you can also go to Litecoin pool, they have 9%. There's
Okay.
also Binance pool, Mining Dutch, BTC.com, Poolin. So you just convince some of these mining pools. Of course, mining pools are not singular entities, but I'm pretty sure that the miners do want to make more fees. And in Litecoin, it's pretty obvious that miners have more control than user nodes. So you don't have to do UASF, user
Yeah, so
activated soft forks.
sweet. Master is a workhorse online. Master, you should go out and reach out to all those guys. You have a pretty big following on X. Go do it. All right, cool, Vlad. Thanks for the last piece of advice. But Litecoin price is breaking out. I guess we'll talk about that. I'll talk about that a little bit to whoever's still here, and then wrap it up.
Oh, yeah.
I've got to go. But thanks again. I appreciate it. Have a good night. Hopefully I didn't keep you up too late, and
No, it's fine.
we'll talk again sometimes later down the road, hopefully.
Okay. Have a nice day, and thank you
All right.
all for listening.
Yeah, thanks so much. See you, Vlad. Appreciate
Bye.
it. Bye. All right, guys. Well, that was awesome. I like Vlad a lot because he focuses on the technological aspects when there's not many people doing that anymore. 1 second, I have to use the restroom real quick, and I'll be right back.
Finally earned a strike, so we're good, right? Great, let's go. Finally earned hype, so we're good, right? Wait, now it's tight, let's go. Finally earned a strike, so we're good, right? Great, let's go. Finally earned hype, so we're good, right? Wait, no, that's tight, let's go. We're all going to succeed, even me. I promise it's true, I mean that's right, tight. Let's go, we're all gonna make it. Tight, let's go. I finally earned stripes, so we're good, right? Great, let's go. I finally earned hype, so we're good, right? Wait, no, that's tight, let's go. I finally earned stripes, so we're good, right? Great, let's go. I finally earned hype, so we're good, right? Wait. No, that's tight, let's go. We're all gonna make it. We're all gonna make it.
All right, guys, for whoever's still here, thanks for hanging out. It looks like there was some news that happened while we were doing that. So I don't know what happened. SEC acknowledges filing for Canary Spot Litecoin ETF. What does that even mean? They said, great, you filed. Does that mean it's pending approval? Like, relatively soon? I just had to pee real quick. This is good. Breakout against others. It looked like it was going to. I think on the daily time frame, once it breaks above here, we should get some rather large movement here against the altcoin market. So a lot of people are talking about FOMC going into this. I don't think it really changes anything, but now it looks more likely that Bitcoin's going to take these highs at like 109K. Bitcoin dominance is nearly 60%. It did look like somebody knew that this was going to happen. There was a decent amount of money flow into Litecoin here, like building bullish divergence since the lows. But does anyone know exactly what this means? Did these guys post it? Post anything on it? Yeah. Chart looks like it's going to get approved pretty fast. Oh, the SEC is asking the public for input on the decision. I wonder how many hate comments there are on that, saying not to do it. I don't know, it's good that Litecoin cleared these. It's a lower time frame range high. Reclaim this $115 level. Now coming back and testing it as support. We'll see if this can continue higher, but it looks really good against others. One more day of LTC others outperformance, and this should start the full ascent to this next horizontal resistance, similar to XRP and XLM. This is a 150% move, 2.5x. Litecoin miner reserves dumped? I don't think so. Maybe. No. Not at all-time low. It looks like this is bottoming out though, and I wouldn't expect them to dump. I think a lot of people were mad about this. Like, people still don't realize what Litecoin is, being a second Bitcoin chain. It's funny. Yeah, those comments are bullish. It means they don't own it. And it means the more hate you see, it's just because they don't have positions, and or they think it's useless and they've bought the mainstream narrative around Litecoin. Yeah, lots of negative from non-Litecoiners. It's like similar to the XRP hate from Bitcoiners, right? Should expect that. A lot of crying. And Litecoin is likely, I still think, to be the best performing altcoin here, at least over the next 2 months. And I think this is the point in the cycle where, again, you have the most eyes on this space, most new money, and people chase what goes up. But I've been streaming for 3 hours now. Not much to say. I mean, this is good to see. I'd pay attention to the technical analysis over news. And news is not tradable at all. It doesn't affect my outlook regardless of if it's approved or not, but the chart setup is bullish. Like I was saying the other day, you have this what looks to be like a nested consolidation structure, the same thing repeating on in a tighter range, sort of at smaller scale. And Litecoin's vertical move is likely to come. I see. Yeah, it can take 240 days. Who knows? It might be approved right away, since it's basically Bitcoin from a code perspective. Yeah, I don't know if BlackRock and Fidelity will file. They might panic file if they get approved pretty fast, and there's demand and prices going up. But cool, guys, thanks for hanging out. I'm gonna end it here, and I'll be back tomorrow. But appreciate you guys tuning in to the interview. Hope it was educational and or / entertaining. But see you all tomorrow. Thanks for hanging out, John. Have a good Wednesday night.
In the ever-changing world of cryptocurrency, staying informed is your greatest asset. The Litecoin forecast brings you daily insights, expert analysis, and cutting-edge predictions. From technical and fundamental analysis to macroeconomic trends, we've got you covered. Don't let the future of finance catch you off guard. Subscribe now and stay ahead with the Litecoin forecast.